This story began with a little expression of the dark side of this world, where the mayor of a town took out 2 object humans from a shut-in hut and handed them over to some guys how much they would pay for them. The guy asked for 5 silver coins for these 2, and with disgust, the guy bought them thinking he would just toss them over to somebody else later on. People around the village didn't seem to be against this, because they were glad that their village finally got rid of the servants of evil gods. That being aside, the people in this world have wondered why they were capable of using magic since ancient times, but there hasn't been an answer to that. So, people have kept on chanting the magic incantations they prefer for different purposes in different times, including the times of wars. Now, in the present time, somewhere in a dark forest, a mercenary mage was chanting a magic spell to attack some guys. But while he was focused on it, the guy got hit by a sword straight in his head. This showed us that the magic was powerful, but by no means almighty against other things. Like if a sword was sent flying at the chanting person, they would die, just like how this mage was killed mercilessly by our protagonist Aldis with a sharp, terrifying look in his eyes. He was fighting off some assassins who seemed to have come after his life, and when he asked them who they were, or why they attacked him all of a sudden, the assassin couldn't even reply to him because he was too terrified of how others were killed by this incredibly powerful sword magic. Aldis targeted him with more swords to keep the assassin from running away, but he killed him, seeing it was no use keeping that guy alive. But there were more assassins hidden on trees, and even if they launched surprise attacks on Aldis, he blocked it easily with his sword. The assassin was shocked to have been sensed, while it was no hard matter for Aldis, since he could easily sense the bloodlust of the assassin gushing out from the start. Aldis didn't actually want to kill anyone, but even if this assassin was left at first, he still attacked Aldis with his self-fung sword style. Aldis didn't want to waste any time, so he sent the sword of this guy flying, which put him in a bind while wondering how a sorcerer could be this skilled. Aldis put a stop to his thinking with his firm answer that he was not a sorcerer but a swordsman, as he slashed the sword right through the guy's neck. After that, he went back from the forest to the port town of Thoria, which was a prosperous town due to the blessing of the forest and coastal trade. It was the second town in the kingdom of Nagras. Once arrived, Aldis informed the attack on him to his friends of a mercenary group, and their leader Ted asked him if he really killed all of them without getting any information out of them. Aldis replied it wouldn't have benefited even if he kept one of them to get information, since they were after his life, so killing them was his natural choice. Ted explained it to him again that it would have been better, but for Aldis, he just didn't want to go through too much hassle and get done with it. Others from their group named Norris, who was the archer, and Ophelia, the sorcerer, knew Aldis was a clumsy one who would kill those guys ruthlessly rather than having to use his abilities to the fullest. They asked him if he had any idea who those guys might be, to which he replied with none except the note that those guys seemed to know about Aldis' sword magic. Ophelia stated if they knew that, then it was a good chance they could be connected to the military. From the mention of the military, Aldis recalled having some attitude issues straight to their general, who tried to ask Aldis to join the military, but Aldis refused straight up to the general, while saying that he wasn't obligated to teach his sword magic to his army. General asked how the hell could he talk back to him in that manner. Actually, the general got to know about Aldis when he was just passing by while on a mission of escorting a merchant, and then a fight between military and bandits occurred. The bandits were greater in number, because of which the soldiers seemed to be struggling, after which some of the bandits also tried to loot the merchant escorted by Aldis. At that time, Aldis used his sword magic to deal with them, and the news of it piqued General's interest, leading him to approach Aldis to join the military. The general told him that joining him meant having a better earning and securing daily needs which Aldis can't have as a normal person. But he didn't care about that at all. So, to mock the general, he asked him to sign a contract if he really wanted Aldis to join, of 500 gold coins per month as his payment. The general got pissed off by hearing that because it was 500 times higher than what he himself had. The soldiers told the general to calm down, while Aldis just took his leave and went off to do his own thing instead of wasting time there. Aldis claimed that it was the general who was more arrogant to him, because of which he said no, and also made it clear that his sword magic couldn't be taught to others either way. Ophelia told him that even if that was the case, He still shouldn't have refused General in a rude way by shaming him in front of a crowd like that, which would make the General hold a grudge against him. Norris giggled while he agreed something like that was why all these was creating more enemies as usual. Ted told him not to laugh on something like that, and admitted to all these himself that his strength was surely monstrous, but he still shouldn't increase the number of his enemies so much. All these understood what Ted means, and since he was indebted to Ted and others, he didn't want it to cause problems for them, so he agreed to be in his best behavior while dealing with nobles and the church. But they knew how hard it would be. So firstly, Ted bet 3 copper coins for all these still not showing any discipline. Then Ophelia joined in betting 5 copper coins for all these not wanting to have any discipline out of clumsiness. And Norris betted straight 1 silver coin for all these not even knowing what was discipline in the first place. After that, they went to the forest of Caucasus located on the south of Thoria. It has been an important source of fuel, food and herbs since ancient times, thus being a pillar of support for the Thoria town's development. However, it was also host to many wild animals, and as well as some unexplored regions where monsters dwell. This time, Ted and his group came to this forest on the request to find a good spot for tree logging. For this request, they needed to wander into the parts of the forest where monsters dwell. Ophelia found a spot where they shouldn't have any problems since the path seemed to be maintained, and it was also close to the main road. She mentioned that the quality of trees was good around here as well, so they should choose this spot. Ted informed others it was decided, so they should now get started with cleaning up monsters around this area, starting with clearing the Twin Blades beast's nest nearby. Then he shouted at Aldis, asking him to pay attention. Aldis told him that it was mainly their request, while he was only participating in this temporarily, so he wasn't related to it that much. Ophelia reminded him it was never late to join them, and since they have been teaming up so often that Aldis started to feel like a member of their party. Aldis said he would think about it, then she asked if he still hadn't given up on finding his former companions. Ophelia tried to make him understand that it had been a year already, and if he didn't find any leads, she wanted him to understand the meaning of it. But Aldis exclaimed that it's only 1 year, which was just a short time to find his friends. Ophelia wished he would understand, but Aldis was holed up on his former party. Then suddenly they heard a scream from a distance crying out for help. Norris wondered if someone was being assaulted nearby, whereas Ted didn't wait and charged straight for the location without even thinking of forming a strategy. Ophelia and Norris knew they couldn't help but follow Ted, despite his personality to jump in to help anyone. Aldis liked how nice of a person Ted was, so he smiled and followed after them as well deeper into the woods. When they arrived, they saw a large group of bandits who seemed to have killed the passing merchants already and took over their carriages. Aldis warned them about the bandits, and Ted realized they were too late. Suddenly, the bandit archers started shooting arrows at Ted and others, from which Ted came forward and blocked the arrows with his sword and shield. He figured those bandits won't let them go now, so they engaged in battle, after which Norris asked Aldis to make sure to protect him while he shot arrows. And thus, Aldis used his sword magic to cut down all the arrows coming at them without any fail, while bandits thought they were successful at cornering them. Norris knew which one he should target, so he aimed at one of the bandits and shot an arrow in the chest of that bandit. Ophelia asked Ted for the signal to use magic, to which Ted replied it wasn't the right time yet. Whereas on the bandits' side, their boss was getting desperate, so he ordered everyone to charge and get rid of the archer, and the sorcerer, referring to Aldis. Aldis took it personally, so to make sure to let them know he wasn't a sorcerer, he throwed some swords behind the bandits and used his sword magic to stab the head of a bandit with it. However, it didn't stop there, as Aldis controlled that sword to go around slashing other bandits' necks. Meanwhile, Ted was engaged in a direct battle against the boss of the bandits. The bandit boss kept Ted busy with fighting, but when he thought he would send other bandits after the archer and sorcerer, he noticed that all of the bandits were already dead. He was shocked to see just how they could have died. Then Ted told him he was the only last one left, as he put the bandit boss to death. After that, they examined the casualties of the merchants who died, along with the party who were supposedly their escorts. Norris figured they can't do anything now, so they should just take what they could and go back. Ted agreed to that and told them to avoid carrying anything heavy. Norris asked Aldis to follow him to check the carriage, but when he went there hoping for some gems or spices, he was shocked to witness the articles inside the carriage. Aldis asked him if there was any problem. Then Norris came out and sighed, as Aldis followed up to check the carriage, and he saw there were 2 little girls inside with shackles in their limbs and trauma in their eyes. Ted brought the children outside and he was troubled at this sight, because this had made their situation complicated. Aldis thought they were some child slaves, so he suggested to Ted that they should take these children back to town. Ted exclaimed he needed to think about what to do, because these children were not only object slaves, but twins as well. To make the matter worse, all these asked them what was an object human, which left others surprised. Then Ted asked him if he seriously didn't know what that meant. Norris laughed as he did find all these strange at first. Then he told him that object humans were actually people that were bought or sold for money. These could be anyone, from the children sold by parents, sinners, or prisoners of war, and the shackles on them restrict them from having any freedom. They weren't protected by the law either, since they were considered objects. All these asked if they were different from normal slaves, to which Norris replied that slaves were still considered humans, whereas object humans were totally considered objects. They could be treated however their owner wanted, for like cutting off their limbs or anything, including taking their lives. He stated that if one abused their slaves, their reputation would worsen, but if they abused their object humans, people would only say that one was bad at managing their products. So, in a way, it was too big for object humans to even have clothes on them. Ted added that these children being twins was also a problem, which all these was unaware of. Ted asked him just where he grew up to not know something as common as this, because twins were considered to be taboo children, since they were said to be disciples of evil gods who brought harm to the goddess. All these knew this didn't make much sense, as Ophelia informed him that the goddess was known to be the greatest existence in this world, who created the earth and loved life. However, in the previous war in the divine realm, the evil god named Grace got in a confrontation against the goddess, and the ones who hurt the goddess were the vanguards called the Twin Devils. All these reaction changed a little at the mention of Twin Devils. Then Ted told him not to make a scary face like that and thought that all these might hate the goddess. But keeping that aside, Ophelia stated that church considered all the twins were born with an unforgivable sin to bear. All these asked her if she believed in such a story, to which she replied that it was just a myth according to her. But in any case, it was a fact that living in this wad was extremely harsh for any twins. In the end, as the night came closer, they ended up taking the twins along with them, and it was mostly Aldi's decision. Ted stated it might be fine, because he wouldn't have liked to leave the twins there by themselves. However, Ted mentioned if these children were normal human objects, they could have sold them in town. But since these were twins, nobody would buy them because twins were always disposed of right at birth. Aldi's asked them what would happen to these twins if they couldn't find a buyer, to which they replied that unsold goods were either killed, or whatever happened to them wouldn't be good at all. Aldi's insisted on asking for an example, which made others get that Aldi's was planning on taking these twins along. Norris replied those twins first of all won't be treated nicely at all. Not only that, but with the shackles they had in their legs they couldn't even properly walk around. Aldi's thought if that was the problem. Then he went towards the twins and used 3 spells from Formula Analysis, Trap Disarmament, and Synchronize Power Release on all those shackles. Then Ophelia worriedly came running while calling out Aldi's to tell him that shackles of object humans couldn't be removed that easily because the shackles were all linked together. They were set up so that if one gets removed, the rest of them would burst into flames. But by the time her explanation even reached Aldi's ears, he removed all the shackles from twins' arms and legs. Others were left shocked by the sight, as Aldi's claimed it was no big deal removing all 3 at once to make sure they won't be triggered. Ted and Norris started laughing as they got to see another strange actions of Aldi's, whereas Ophelia shouted how was that even possible. She asked Aldi's to explain how he did it, to which he replied that he just released all of them at once. She said it was impossible to use multiple spells simultaneously, and that too, without chanting anything. Aldi's asked Ophelia why she thought incantations were needed to use magic, since it would be more flexible to not use such a roundabout way. Aldi's stood up after that, and claimed that he would take these 2 twins with him, and take responsibility for them. Aldi's and Norris asked if he was serious about it, while Aldi's said he would give up his share of the goods from the carriage in return. Ted tried to make him consider it again, because this decision of his was not benefiting him in any case, and these object humans were plain strangers to him. He won't make any money off them, and the town might not even let them in. Aldi's said that it was right he wasn't getting any benefit in this, but if what Ophelia said earlier was true, then he figured that abandoning these 2 would be too irresponsible of him. Ted told him to suit himself, and mentioned that it was not that bad since he didn't want to abandon these children either. Aldi's apologized for the trouble, and he assured the twins that he won't ever let something like these shackles on them anymore. After that, he went to sleep while the twins wondered what was happening since this was something that never happened to them. Next day, they left to return to the town, and on their way, Aldi's told Ophelia that using incantations to cast magic was just a misconception on the sorcerer's part. He took the explanation of a swordsman who didn't need to shout to use his moves. Ophelia said that magic was completely different from swordsmanship. Then all these asked her if that was the case, then why their body moves as they wish without them having to chant or process it. She couldn't argue on that any further, while Ted added that it was interesting to sound, since nobody really questioned before why their bodies move as they like. Norris asked him if this meant that using magic for him was as easy as walking for them, to which all these replied that would be appropriate. Ophelia was still not used to that, since using 4 different spells at the same time was still something hard to pull off just like that. Norris said they should try to get all these into their party if that was the case, while letting someone as unusual as this get away would be a waste. Ted mentioned that he would welcome it as well with open arms. All these just replied he would think about it, as Ted told others to not let anyone know about twins because it would put all these to attract more trouble. All these remembered that he still had to think of the twins, as they were still scared and hugging together with fear. All these gave the twins the children's dresses he found in the carriage, while there were still some uncertainties. Soon, the gate of Thoria town was within sight, but when the guards on the gate saw twins, their reactions weren't necessarily normal but opposite in an angry way. Norris approached the guards to not look at them angrily like this, since they were just escorting them, but guards insisted that bringing in twins would cause chaos in the town. Norris went closer to the guard and slipped some coins in the guard's hands, and the guard understood the meaning behind it and asked them not to cause any troubles inside. With that being done, all these managed to enter the town with the twins. Once they got inside, Norris called out all these to pay him up from the money he paid to the guards. Norris alerted him once again that he would need to be extra careful while walking around with twins, and rest just try not to make any more enemies. All these thanked him for the help, to which Ted replied it wasn't something to worry about and now they would go back to report their findings. Ophelia told him if he ever needed help with anything that required a female, then she would help out as much as she could. After that, they left and now all these figured he should head back to the inn where he stays usually, hoping they would have enough rooms for the twins. Suddenly, he heard a man shout upon seeing twins, and once people noticed, they asked why in the world there were twins here in this town. They believed it was a filthy sight for them, because of which, the night came but all these had to keep moving on from one inn to another. He didn't expect it would be this bad, because when he went back to his inn, the innkeeper kicked him out because of the twins. She didn't want to keep them even if all these offered to pay for them. She felt like all these had a grudge or something to have brought twins at her inn. Wherever he went, everybody seemed to have hatred towards twins, which was worse than he had imagined. All these looked at the twins, as they seemed to not be able to take more hatred, and thought he should quickly do something. Then a girl called him out and asked if he was looking for a place to stay, and if that was the case, she asked him to stay at her inn, while she came closer to invite him. All these replied he would be happy to stay at her place, but the more important question was if the other 2 with him could come along. The girl replied at first that bringing children was not a problem, but when she noticed these children were actually twins, she was left speechless for a while. But somehow after some time, all these entered a room with food in his hands, while recalling how that lady let him stay but at double the rate than usual. It was helpful that she was at least not a bad person, so now all these brought the food on the table and asked the twins to come and eat before the food got cold. But all these noticed while eating that the twins didn't seem to come and eat, so he just finished his share of the meal, and went to sleep while leaving the food on the table. After some hours, all these couldn't sleep because he was worried about the twins, so he got up to check if the twins slept without eating. But thankfully, the plates on the table were clean, which meant that the twins ate after he went to bed. He wondered if they could not eat properly with people watching them. After that, all these observed that these twins were shivering from cold and still stuck together. He couldn't help but imagine just what kind of treatment they must have received up until now just because they were twins. All these felt sad for them, as he put a blanket on them while stoning his resolve to protect both of them. The twins didn't have a good past like all these figured, because even if they've lived together for so long, they've had their own harsh situations. However, it wasn't like this in the beginning, since they only began to realize they weren't normal after they disobeyed their mother's instructions and snuck out to play. Because the people started to hit them with rocks when they saw them, and the children realized that their existence was called twins, while also being detested at the same time. Their parents cried out when they got to know about it, and hugged the twins while saying sorry to them. After which, they didn't sneak out again having a memory of the outside. But their peaceful life soon came to an end, when their village got attacked by a beast which killed the father of the twins. As for their mother, she was desperate to support the twins by herself, and in the process she overworked herself until she got sick and died half a year later. That was the day when suffering started in the life of those two twins, when their door opened loudly and some guys from the village came. They took the children and shut them inside a hut until they found a buyer, who would take them even if they were servants of the evil god. The girls hadn't even finished mourning their mother, and half a month later they were taken out of the hut and put on shackles before being given away to the buyers. The twins couldn't forget the look on the face of those villagers filled with disgust, and since then, they spend their days locked in a moving carriage. Whenever they reached a town, they would only be handed over to a new person. And while the person in charge changed, their treatment towards the twins did not, and at some point of time, they got covered with a piece of cloth and got fed a piece of disgusting hard bread. Sometimes, when a guy would come to see them, they hoped it would be an end of their sufferings, but it only ended up in more torture and beating from that person. The twins wondered why they were being treated like this. The twins couldn't comprehend the reason since they lacked knowledge and everything. Eventually, they understood this much, that they were called the servants of the evil god, and that they won't be beaten by the adults if they just didn't disobey them along with getting a little food in a while. They wished to go home and see their parents, but there was nothing they could go back to. The twins, even if they were just children, had to go through fears like if they let out their feelings or cry, would they get hit again? Or if they talk back, would they get beaten or something like that? So, they totally shut themselves in and closed their mouths. Only things those twins could do was to cling onto the last piece of warmth left by hugging each other, and suppress their emotions. This was all the wisdom these poor twins had until one day, a change occurred, which was Aldi's finding these twins. At the first time when they saw Aldi's, they thought that just the person who tormented them had changed again. However, for some reason, this time the eyes of Aldi's reminded them of their parents for some reason. And it was only later that they realized that Aldi's didn't despise them. He was the one who removed their shackles, carried them on his back, and even gave a lot of food to eat, along with a place to live. The twins couldn't understand how they should react when he offered them food. They thought he might still hit them if they dared to touch the food. They could see the troubled look on Aldi's face, and when he went to sleep without cleaning the table, the twins began eating, and this was the first day they were finally able to sleep comfortably, after being relieved from the torment of hunger. The life of twins was still worrying for them, but it was just the beginning of the curious life of the boy and the twins. From their point of view, the boy went out in the morning and returned in the evening. He told them to sit with him and eat, but the twins were still too afraid to move, but they liked to live in a warm room where they got to eat their fill without anything scary or painful happening to them, like a dream come true. The only time they were afraid was when they left the room to go to the restroom, and other people spotted them. The twins heard Aldi's telling them to avoid being seen together, but since they were each other's only family and only ally, they couldn't stand being separated even if it was for a moment. Now, in the present night, Aldi's was bringing food to the twins like usual, and the twins were sitting in the corner. He thought it wouldn't be any different than any other day if he didn't do something about it, so Aldi's went and sat down next to those twins. He took a handful of the meal and asked one of the twins to open her mouth. The twin was hesitant, but after seeing the kind smile on his face, she opened her mouth and Aldi's fed her. She liked eating the food, while Aldi's fed the other twin with a spoon. He told them they could eat slowly, and noticed that the twins were actually crying. He asked them if it was too hot, but either way, after this incident, the twins became able to eat together with the boy. They wondered what Aldi's meant to them, and then he thought it was the right time to ask the twins what their names were. The twins replied for the first time, with the name of the girl on right being Philia, and the one on left is Rihanna. After half a month passed, they were told that they would be leaving the inn by Aldi's. Philia and Rihanna saw him talking to the innkeeper about it, and apparently they had to leave because the twins were seen by others. Aldi's told them that he rented a house, and that he would take them there now. Aldi's took the twins to his home, which was located just outside the town, and he assured them that they could feel at ease there. Aldi's informed them that they won't need to worry about being seen, so they could run and play around here. He asked them if they were happy, to which the twins expressed they liked this place better. After moving into their new home, the twins became less wary, but they still couldn't talk properly to Aldi's. And it was when a problem arose when one day Aldi's came back, and to his surprise, he saw that Rihanna was not feeling good. They tried to wake her up and ask what was wrong, and after Aldi's put her in bed and examined, he learned that Rihanna was having a fever. He hoped it wasn't anything serious, and while Aldi's couldn't exactly depend on church's healers, or Ted's party, which was out on a mission, he figured that he would have to do something by himself. Philia asked Aldi's to do something about Rihanna's condition, otherwise she would die. And after seeing her face, Aldi's thought until he recalled that once someone told him that he could cool down the fever of a person by cooling their head. After that, all these put a piece of wet cloth on her head, then added some medicine to the rice ball and fed it to Rihanna slowly. Philia wondered why all these was going so far for them, and when he noticed her nervous face, he asked her what was wrong. Philia couldn't help but ask this time about why all these was so nice to them, even though they were the servants of the evil god. She told him how she learned from everyone that they were the enemies of the goddess, and whoever acts nice to them would end up being cursed. She couldn't hold her trembling as she had never asked something out of her free will in a long time. Then Aldis felt obliged and told her that he knew Philia and Rihanna weren't the servants of the evil god. Philia didn't expect that answer, as he sat down and told her that everyone was being deceived by the goddess, and she was just a normal human just like everyone else. He told her that the reason her parents were nice to them was because they also knew this fact that she and Rihanna weren't the servants of evil god, but their own children. Philia remembered that her mother cried before, and this must be the reason as well. Aldis declared that he also knew that, which was why he would do everything to protect both of them. So, he didn't want Philia to ever call herself servant of evil god again because she and Rihanna hadn't done anything wrong. Philia and Rihanna cried tears of relief that day, and Aldis got closer to these girls. Next day, Rihanna's fever came down, and then it was Philia who got a fever as well. And during this time, Aldis stayed by their sides until they fully recovered. He was glad that this time, the twins were able to sleep more peacefully than ever before. Meanwhile, somewhere in a plain region, a lady stood on the path where people travel through. She had a strong hunch that what she was looking for would soon come here, so she decided to stay at that spot. Back to Aldis's house, he was now used to be welcomed by the twins whenever he came back, as they were willing to ask for food when hungry. After that, he told them that he would prepare food for them right away, as he got to peeling some apples. The twins stayed by his side like he was their safe place, and when it got night, Aldis used to read stories to them until they sleep. But whenever Aldis went back to his bed and lie down, he would find the twins by his side every day. Next day, he brought skewers for them, and it was the girls' first time having them. They kept munching on it eagerly, and when Aldis asked if they liked the skewers, the twins expressed them their happiness with smiles on their faces. To Aldis, it felt like it had been forever since he spent some time peacefully like this. But he still had some problems, because Ted and others showed up to Aldis' house and asked him if he would start working again. Aldis told him not to get closer to the children with his scary face, while Ted's concern was because Aldis had been refusing all of the invitations recently as if he didn't want to earn anymore. They were concerned about him, but at the same time, happy to see that Aldis seemed to be getting along with the twins. Norris asked Aldis if everything was fine. He should start working again, and he also got a nice piece of information for him. Norris asked Aldis if he heard about the beauty who appears in the main road. Aldis was unaware about it, while this rumor had spread all over the town of Thoria, that when a person took the main road from Thoria to the capital, around half a day later they would confront a young woman standing there all alone. She had said to have challenged every mercenary passing by, and without a doubt had defeated all of them. Aldis asked if she was a bandit, to which Norris replied that women don't take anything, and even if she challenges people, none of them really get dead or injured. If people refuse her challenge, she would just let them pass through. Norris stated she was strong but seemed like a harmless weirdo, and apart from some people, nobody found her to be a problem. Aldis asked him why were some people finding it a problem, to which he replied it was because of their pride. If they let a weird person be, they couldn't walk with their head raised high. Aldis understood that the client was the Lord of Thoria, and while that woman on the road refused to give out her name or anything, the request from Lord of Thoria was to negotiate with her and get her to come to Lord's mansion. Aldis asked why the Lord wanted to ask mercenaries for this when he could have just sent his soldiers, to which Norris said the Lord might not want to send his own messenger, or got refused already. The reward for the request was 2 gold coins. Aldis mentioned it was too little for 4 people, to which others replied they were actually handling other requests, while giving this one to Aldis because they thought it would be good for him. Philia and Rihanna asked if he was going out, and he asked them in return if they could stay at home and wait for him. He assured them that he would be back for sure, and asked them not to be worried. After that, he left straight for the location of request at full speed. He figured it would usually take around 2 hours to reach his destination. But to arrive there quickly, he used his flying magic while pretending to be running so that others wouldn't find him odd. Because after all, in this world, flying magic and chanting less magic were absolutely out of common sense. Meanwhile, some random mercenaries were being defeated one after another. The spectators were shocked to see that the woman took down 10 people in a row, and at the same time, All these arrived there and quickly stopped before he reached the sights of others. The woman was a bit disappointed as she couldn't find anyone who could hold against her even for 10 seconds. But without any delay, she asked if there was anyone next wanting to challenge her. She didn't mind if all of them came at her at once, while she stood there prepared to crush them. Then a mercenary stood up to challenge her next, and the other guys hoped he could give a good fight to that lady. The mercenary Gandalf claimed that he had been wielding weapons since before she was born, after hearing which, the woman named Nail took out a small knife. Gandalf charged straight at her with his spear, but suddenly she disappeared from his line of sight. And suddenly, she showed up standing right above his spear. Nail closed in with a rapid speed and put the knife on Gandalf's neck, as she declared it her victory. The mercenaries were shocked to see how strong Nail really was, and Aldis was one of them to be shocked, as no matter how he looked at it, the speed Nail demonstrated was not something that could be achieved by an ordinary person. Nail announced again if there was anyone to challenge her next, after which Aldis asked the crowd to let him through as he walked towards Nail. Others tried to warn Aldis, but he went anyway, which made Nail think that he was her next challenger. She smiled while preparing for the next fight, but Aldis clearly told her that he was here to negotiate and didn't actually plan on fighting. Nail was pissed off by hearing that, and while Nail kept trying to explain it to her, Nail throwed a knife at him without any warning. Nail used his transparent barrier magic to block that short sword, as he asked Nail to listen to what he was saying. He told her it wasn't funny to aim for the throat of somebody who came to negotiate. Nail told him that she had no interest in talking to him, but if he really wanted her to listen, then Aldis would need to convince her by fighting. Aldis knew what she wanted was just a fight, whereas Nail warned him he could convince her if only he managed to defeat her, as she charged at him with the intent to finish it quickly. Aldis used his rock magic to form an earth wall, which Nail easily passed through, and told him she would make better use of these rocks. She formed throwables from those pieces of rocks, which came out abnormal to Aldis. But before he got much time to react, Nail rained down all the sharp rocks at him, and Aldis used his magic barrier to block all of them. Suddenly, another magic attack of fire, this time, came at him from his blind spot, and Aldis managed to dodge it as well with his agility. He quickly felt Nail's presence behind him, so Aldis flipped himself in mid-air to dodge her trajectory. She could see that Aldis was quite good, so to face him, she raised her level of fighting by shooting a direct wind attack at Aldis before he could have time to still down. Aldis knew that he would be done for if he were to take this attack head-on, so he bent down and used his magic barrier magic at a certain angle to deflect this attack of Nail's and send it somewhere else. She asked him just who he was, and Aldis had the same question for her. Meanwhile, the spectators around them were amazed to know that Nail turned out to be a sorcerer, and Aldis was keeping up with her. It was Aldis' first time to see someone other than him to use chantless magic, which really created the question in his mind about who she was. Their fight was getting more intense by the passing time, since Nail was showing no signs of going easy on Aldis, while he was trying to fight her with made-up chants for using magic, just to make sure others around them don't doubt him. Nail could see that, so she asked him why he was going so far as to imitate a fake spell, just to hold back. But when she took a look at the people around them, she understood he wanted to keep it a secret. So Nail decided to get rid of all of them and used her wind magic to send all of the mercenaries flying 100 meters away from them. Aldis stood his ground while seeing others being swayed away. Nail noticed that some of the people were still around them, so seeing that was not enough, she formed an even bigger magic attack this time, after seeing which all the people ran away as fast they could from these two. Nail released her attack directed at Aldis, and to deal with it, he formed a pointed magic barrier which cut Nail's attack. She told him that he could now go all out since she got rid of the hindrance, to which Aldis replied it would be pointless to ask her for negotiation either way. Nail told him that it was still the same, and he would have to defeat her to make her listen to him. Now, Aldis decided to fight for real, as he took out his swords, which gave Nail an idea about Aldis' combat style. The swords of Aldis flew around with his sword magic, while he asked Nail if she still wanted him to go all out. He asked her to make sure not to be defeated too fast, as he rained down all the swords at her. Nail had a tough time blocking all the swords coming at her, and no matter what, it was like they were countless. She tried deflecting them with her own swords, then used a barrier to block them, but it still left many swords which she couldn't help but to move constantly to dodge. She wondered what would happen if she just blasted the area, and once she did, it was Aldis who had to cover himself this time from all the incoming rocks at him. Nail flew over him and charged multiple light magic attacks, upon seeing which Aldis did the same, and both of them looked into each other's eyes challengingly. Nail and Aldis released their powerful magic attacks without anyone holding back, and when it all clashed against each other, they created a huge explosion, and this time bigger than the previous one. After the explosion calmed down and dust started settling, Nail came down coughing, but she didn't get time to take a breath, as all these quickly closed in with his sword, which Nail blocked. Now their fight has turned into close combat with swords, and Nail was surprised to see he was actually a swordsman. All these was glad that someone got that correct about him for once, and from the next slash of his, he sent Nail's daggers flying and pointed his sword at Nail's neck. All these defeated Nail without hurting or injuring her at all, after which he asked her if she was satisfied with that. Nail knew she lost now, so she smiled and called all these as his lord. All these couldn't make sense of what she meant, but even if he asked her, it didn't help much. Meanwhile, in the town of Thoria, the twins got out again to roam around out of curiosity. They wanted to hang around in the town once, and their peaceful life had actually made them less cautious. Philia and Rihanna were excited to see so many people, large houses, and all around them. Philia was running ahead with happiness, and mistakenly, she fell down. Then an old man came to ask if she was okay. The old man checked if she was injured or not, and when he saw the other girl, he asked them which one of them was elder sister. The old man smiled as he mentioned the two looked alike, but for some reason, he noticed they were too similar in looks, and that was when he got to know these were twins. The old man was shocked, so he quickly looked around first and sighed, as he told the twins it must be hard for them while looking at them with pity. The twins didn't expect that reaction from a stranger. Then the old man warned them to make sure to wear their hoods properly and leave at once, never letting anyone else see their faces. It was the first time the twins noticed there might be some good people other than Aldi's. Now back to Aldi's. Nail mentioned she didn't expect Aldi's would be that strong, while Aldi's was still hung up on asking her about who she was calling her lord. Nail stated she was obviously talking about him, as what she sought was the limit of a human's potential. She wanted to find the one surpassing those limits, and now that she did, Nail found it fitting for Aldi's to become her lord and serve under him. Aldi's wanted to avoid being involved with her, and he wanted to ask her who she was. He mentioned that her power was similar to his, so he asked Nail if she was the same as him. Nail replied she didn't understand what he wanted to say, which he took as a way to ignore his question. Nail told him that she was just his faithful servant, nothing more, nothing less. She assured him that she would always answer his summons, which got only heard to him as more trouble than anything else. Either way, he told her again that he just came here to tell her to go and visit the Lord of Thoria, to which she replied if this was a command then she would agree. Aldi's figured there were a lot of things he needed to talk to her about, but the request was his priority for now. Nail mentioned she would first fix the damage that occurred from their fight, so Nail used her magic and filled up all the rocks in the holes just like they were before. It became like there was no fight occurring here, and seeing her skills, Aldi's figured that he could do the same, but for someone other than him to be able to do this without incantation was odd. Nail told him the work was over, after which Aldi's stayed on his guard until he took her to the Lord of Thoria's mansion. The soldier on the gate confirmed she was the one mentioned in the description, so he agreed to let her in. And Aldi's didn't need to come along with her, so the guard gave him the reward, and Nail wasn't happy to see that her lord wasn't coming with her. Aldi's told her that his job was to only bring her here, and Nail didn't want to go to a place unrelated to her lord. She declined from going because she didn't care about this place or even the Lord of Thoria at all, and Aldi's had to tell her to wait. Nail said if this was an order then she wouldn't mind it, so she asked him for confirmation if this was an order or not. Nail was confused for a moment, then he thought if all it took her to listen was to give an order, then he would do so. And thus, he told her this was an order and asked Nail to meet the Lord. Nail listened to his order and agreed to obey it at once. After that, she went to the mansion all by herself while Nail went back to town. He thought that the world was indeed really vast, since he hadn't met anyone who could fight him equally like Nail. And since encountering her was unprecedented, there was always a possibility of someone stronger than her being out there, which all these haven't just confronted yet. But he wanted to take care of himself because currently there were some people to care about. He went back home, and as usual Aldi's was welcomed by Philia and Rihanna. They told him that today, they made the lunch themselves this time, and that they took some sandwiches for him. Aldi's was happy to see them being cheerful, so he said they should eat them together. Then he heard a knock on the door, so he asked both of them to quickly go and hide in the back. He saw Nail on the door and asked why she was here. Nail informed him that she had come here to report that she fulfilled his order. Aldi's wondered what she was talking about, until she reminded him about meeting with the Lord. Aldi's remembered something like that did happen after all. After that, he didn't want to humor her much, so he said goodbye and tried closing the door, but Nail placed her feet in between and asked if there were any other orders. Aldi's kept declining her, but Nail insisted on letting her focus on protecting him inside. He thought Nail was trying to coax him into renting a room to her. Then he told her if she didn't have any money, he would pay for her night at the inn. Nail made it clear she wasn't short on money or anything. It was just that she wished to be by his side in case of emergency. All these shut the door on her as he doesn't want to let Nail inside the house because of the twins. Nail said she would stay there and guard outside if that was the case. So just like that, she stayed there, while all these learned later on that Nail was quite rude to the Lord of Thoria, and she even refused challenges from the soldiers who wanted to confirm her strength. Nail refused the invitation of the Lord to become his personal guard. And not only that, but her rude way of doing so made them hold a grudge against her. Now, all these returned back to his peaceful life, and next morning, he prepared breakfast for the twins. Philia quickly sat down and started eating it hurriedly and got too hot on her tongue. All these told her to eat quietly like Rihanna, and upon looking at her closely, he imagined that she was eating like a squirrel. Their peaceful breakfast was going well, except for one thing, which was just standing outside the house, Nail. Philia asked him if that white-haired woman was still standing outside, and he told them to make sure she won't see them. All these still had doubts about how Nail addresses him, but in any case, Nail was standing guard at the gate always. And when all these went out, she followed him and sometimes even supported all these in his hunts and other works. She made his hunts very efficient, and even if she was unknown to him, she was still reliable. So, slowly but gradually, a strange sense of trust was established between them, and all these wondered if it was really fine to let it be like this. Later on, it was raining, and all these saw that the twins were looking out from the window, as they were worried about Nail being soaked outside. Nail didn't move from her spot to guard her lord, and the twins worried if she didn't have a home or bed. Whereas all these was shocked to see she was not resting even on rainy days. Then the twins came and gave him a towel to give it to her because she must be cold, and being cold was hard just like not having a home was. All these couldn't help but do what the kind twins wanted, so he understood and asked them to go back into the room in the back. After that, all these went to Nail and she greeted him in the morning. He told her that she should stay at the inn on rainy days like this, otherwise it would look like he was bullying her. Nail assured him she would be okay, but all these repeated it wasn't how it was looking, that was why he came here. But she still wasn't budging, so all these told her to wait and asked her to use the towel in his hands. Nail expressed her gratitude for his consideration, so she took off her hood and dried herself with the towel. Nail was really beautiful. Anyone could not go without staring at her even if they glanced by mistake. And all these knew that, but he still wanted to remain firm for the twins' sake. Then Nail said she would like him to give her thanks to the twins inside the house as well. All these quickly got on his guard, as he asked her just how she got to know about the twins. She told him it was visible from the time she spent outside, but all these was more fixated on knowing how she could tell they were twins. Nail replied that she could sense their magical power, from which it seemed pretty clear that they were twins since they had the same shape and color of magic. All these got on his guard, and he was reminded again that he knew nothing about this woman's identity or purpose, but she didn't seem to be hostile towards him. He wasn't sure if revealing twins to her would be fine or not, but now that she already knows that, all these asked her what she thought of the existence known as the goddess. Nail didn't ask him to ask abstract questions like that, but her answer was simple. It didn't matter how she thought of someone who doesn't even exist. Nail doesn't think the goddess exists, and all these didn't expect someone from this world would be like this. Nail added that the same could be said for any other deity as well, because there wasn't a god in the sky, sea, nor the earth. If there was even a god, they would be so far away that a human wouldn't need to care since they couldn't reach there. All these was amazed by her words, and even if this world was where the goddess and her apostles intervene. He said if she was right, then what does the church believe in? To which she replied it was something only they would know because she doesn't know about people she never met. Nail knew that goddesses hated twins, but around 1 in 100 pregnant women, there were at least one twin. It was a natural occurrence regardless of whether God exists or not, so hating people just because they were twins was indeed a foolish thing. Nail made sure he won't worry about her telling anyone about the twins, and be it those twins or anyone else. Whoever was under all these, Nail took it as her duty to protect them as well. All these didn't see any doubt or hesitation in her eyes, and he told her to swear to uphold whatever she just said now. Nail swore to him on her parents and her mission to keep those words. He didn't get a lot of what Nail said, for now he decided to believe in her, and this was the day when all these gained a mysterious but powerful ally by his side. Nail introduced herself to the twins, and also thanked them for their kindness for the towel they sent. However, the twins seemed to be wary of her, and Nail figured she might have to wait until they got used to her. All these introduced the twins to her, and then he asked Nail if she had a name. Nail replied she didn't have a proper name before, and not even Nail was her real name. All these was surprised she didn't have a name, and asked who she was. She told him he could call her anything, but since that would sound weird, the twins started thinking what they should name Miss Nameless Lady. Aldi's thought he should think as well, and since the name Nail sounded pretty good for her, he told her that her real name would be Nail from now on. He asked her if she was fine with it, to which Nail replied she was completely fine with it, and so she greeted them again, mentioning that she would be under their care from now on. After that, all these went to the usual meeting place of Ted's Morning Star party. Norris mentioned Nail was weird, and the fact that her identity was unknown was still there. All these stated it was fine with him since she didn't have any prejudice against the twins, and there were more mercenaries out there with unknown identities as well. Norris mentioned that Aldi's was himself an example of that. But keeping that aside, Ophelia added that letting Nail live in his home was still a bit unsettling. Aldi's knew there won't be any problem because thinking back, she just denied the existence of Goddess like that. Ted said if Aldi's was alright with that, then it was fine, and that aside, he mentioned there had been more rumors. Aldi's asked them if it was about the Grinder coming down from the mountains. Grinder was a monster that lived on the Cannabis Mountain Range, and it was like a mixed breed of buffalo, horse, and had 4 wings with sharp claws. It was known to be more powerful than the normal monsters, and thus it was feared by many adventurers. Aldi's stated he didn't expect Grinder would come down ever, to which Norris added that recently the number of carnivores around the Thoria have dropped recently, and it led to the increase in number of the herbivores, which led this area to become an attractive hunting ground for the Grinder. Ted mentioned Aldi's saying before that hunting had become more efficient with a strong lady, to suggest it might be related to this matter. Aldi's asked him if he was implying this was his fault, and all the 3 agreed to it. Ted explained to Aldi's that even if the monsters were dangerous, he shouldn't be going around hunting them to extinction like this. Norris added one shouldn't challenge the ecosystem, while Ophelia didn't expect what she said would even have an effect on Aldi's. Aldi's apologized hesitantly for causing them some trouble. Then Ted brought out the letter of invitation which stated that the military was forming a subjugation team to take care of the Grinder, and they were pushed around so much that they even asked mercenaries to join them as well. Ted wished he could have refused, but since this was a request from Lord of Thoria personally, he couldn't. And this was where Norris said that they would be happy if a certain rude anti-military guy agreed to tag along with them. Ophelia rephrased his sentence that she would be happy to have an unknown guy with unknown levels and even unknown hunting ways to drive monsters to extinction. Aldi's got their taunts, so he agreed to help them out, and after 2 days of preparation, the team formed to subjugate the Grinder left Thoria and headed out for the place where the Grinder was expected to appear next. These areas were plain fields, and currently it was filled with many soldiers, and the soldiers had their hopes in their Captain Deccan, who was leading them in this important subjugation. Captain Deccan was glad that he was also getting some help from Captain Cruz. Deccan was known to be the military's best swordsman, and these soldiers believed there was no way he would lose to that Grinder. Aside from the military, 9 mercenary teams have also joined the subjugation, and Captain Cruz didn't feel that well about the general hiring mercenaries as well. Deccan claimed that they don't need to depend on the power of mercenaries and handle it by just their own military power. Cruz wondered if Deccan could move past that incident, which took place when Deccan was asked to fight against a female mercenary. He was told that he should defeat this female mercenary who was arrogant towards the Lord of Thoria, but when he went to put her in her place, Deccan proudly admitted that he would defeat her easily without even harming her seriously. The female they were talking about was none other than Nail, who went there on Aldi's mission on their first day. On that day, Nail did fight with one soldier, Captain Deccan, but their fight ended right when Deccan charged at her. His sword was sent flying in front of everyone, including the Lord and General of Thoria. Deccan was left astounded from the sight of his defeat by a woman, who didn't even move a step in the fight. His defeat came with a lot of shame on his name, and Deccan being defeated in just one strike from a female mercenary became a hot topic for all the soldiers to laugh at. Deccan wanted to redeem himself by racking up some achievements during this subjugation at any cost, whereas on the mercenaries' side, Ted found it insane for the military to be forming silly formations to subjugate the Grinder. Not only that, but Deccan didn't even get any sorcerer even if they were up to go against a flying monster. Norris told others that the military seemed to have brought many soldiers which were just new recruits. Aldi's was joining this subjugation like he said before. Then his servant Nail also came after checking the area around, and reported it to her Lord Aldi's that she didn't see any monsters nor the Grinder around them. Norris asked her if she was serious about Aldi's being her lord, which caused her to be angry. Ted told them it was about the time for lunch, while Ophelia was the only one who was fazed by watching Nail fly before. They started having lunch in the fields under the good weather. Ted mentioned that usually beast kings appear in these areas, then Nail mentioned that she and Aldis already hunted around 50 of them. Aldis signaled her to stay quiet, but Ted didn't find it unusual at all. He asked Nail if she would join their party since she was so skilled, to which Nail replied if Aldis chose to go with them, then she would follow him. Ted started taking a bit of rest since it wasn't that bad to sit here, since they hardly get any rest from their job. Ophelia figured the weather was really good today, while Ted was more pleased with the gentle breeze and the shadow of a bird in the sky. But suddenly, he noticed that the shadow was not actually of a bird but something huge. It wasn't a killer bird or anything else either. Then Nail told them it was clearly the grinder. Ted immediately asked Norris to put out smoke signals, and the grinder seemed to be going in another direction. The grinder went towards the location where the main forces were located. Aldis and Nail went ahead after the grinder and fielded as fast they could to reduce the number of casualties. But by the time they arrived, what Aldis thought happened, as the grinder was standing on the pile of bodies of soldiers. The remaining ones were injured and they asked for help, but the grinder was about to attack them as well. Nail throwed her dagger on the grinder which stabbed its claws, while Aldis prepared a magic attack while doing the fake chant, so that he wouldn't be found out by these soldiers. He released the fire magic at the grinder but it dodged it by flying up. The grinder released its own magic attack unexpectedly, and Nail blocked it with her barrier. Aldis sighed since he couldn't use his sword magic in front of the military. The grinder flew from there and it started to go towards the direction where the rest of the army was. Then the Captain Cruz stopped Aldis and asked him to use some magic to heal the injured ones. Aldis declined because he couldn't use healing magic. Then the Druze asked for some potions or anything, except letting them go, because he didn't think Aldis could catch up with a flying target. Aldis knew it was possible for him, but he couldn't because of these many people present. Meanwhile, the smoke signals started spreading all over the place wherever the formations were, and Captain Decan alerted other soldiers. He thought that he wouldn't have a problem with 30 people together. Not only that, but he desperately wanted to be the one to defeat the grinder. He wanted it no matter what. Then a soldier informed him about the shadow of something flying towards them. It was the fierce grinder, and Decan was happy to see it was finally here. He told everyone to prepare, but before he could even finish giving commands to others, the grinder was on its move and it killed a couple of soldiers in a row with its unstoppable claws. Decan felt a heavy realization of what they were fighting against, as the grinder went back up to prepare to come down again. Decan couldn't even keep up with the grinder's speed, while the grinder descended again as if it was something out of someone's nightmare. The grinder was way more huge than he experienced. Decan tried not to falter because it was his only chance to redeem himself, and if he ran away, it would stay with him as a regret for the rest of his life. He ordered other soldiers not to be scared and look at the claw of the grinder which was already wounded, but by Nail, not by the soldiers. The soldiers attacked just like they were ordered to, but it was just a mere seconds until all those who went to attack got wiped. Decan saw them dying one after another right in front of his eyes, as the grinder pierced and pulled out the soldiers' bodies like they were just fodders for it. Decan realized at this point that he could not do anything to this beast, and that, if he doesn't retreat now, more of them would be annihilated. Decan doubted if they could even make a scratch on it, and then another squad came down from their spot and blindly charged at the grinder. Decan tried to stop them but it was no use, since the grinder used a really powerful move, Wind Slasher, to slash all the soldiers in its trajectory at once. The blood of those soldiers was all over the place, and Decan was feeling helpless in front of this terrifying beast. Almost all of the soldiers he brought along were dead, and the grinder started to approach Decan as well. Decan was trembling more and more as the beast came closer. Then an arrow came and hit Grinder's beak. The Morning Star party of Ted had arrived just in time to confront the grinder, and Ted didn't fear at all to slash his sword aiming at the grinder's neck. But he couldn't get too close to the monster because of its magic winds, so Ophelia started chanting her magic attack to limit Grinder's movements with ice magic. The grinder shattered all of the ice, and nothing they did had any effect on the monster. But they couldn't give up here, so Norris still kept shooting arrows while Ted kept charging with his sword skills. They were hardly able to keep the monster busy, while Decan was completely hopeless. He saw that these mercenaries were good and had good coordination, so they might stand a chance against Grinder. But at the same time, Ted's shield broke and he was left with only a sword to fight. The grinder was no harder to deal with, and Decan understood they were doomed. Norris shouted just where Aldis was when they needed him the most, as the grinder charged its powerful magic wind attack. Decan knew how dangerous it was, so he shouted for them to run away. Then suddenly, one of the grinder's wings got cut off from a slash. As the wing fell down, Decken saw that this slash came from mercenary Aldis. He was finally off to fight with the grinder, and this time, he didn't want to hold back like before. Aldis landed down by Ted's group side, while the grinder screamed in pain from losing a wing. Nail came in to join the fun as well, so she threw her daggers into the left leg of the grinder to make sure it won't run away like before. Aldis and Nail wanted to finish it for good now. Aldis beheaded the monster at once and put this hunt to an end. Decken didn't expect they would survive this at all. Then he heard the sound of a soldier behind him. He quickly went to ask the soldier if he was all right. But it was no use, since Decken was the reason all the soldiers charged into fight without any plan. His reinforcements were annihilated, and not only that, they were saved by the mercenaries, only leaving Decken as the sole survivor from his squad. It was all over for Decken, and he knew that his life would become a nightmare from now on. He heard Nail talking to Aldis, as she asked him if they should only take his head or body as well. Aldis told her that the body wasn't worth anything, so leave it. Decken looked at the two properly and recognized that Nail was the same woman who started his misery. If she hadn't been there, he thought would be better off. Nail noticed Decken looking at her, so she gave him intense stares to not get any thought against her at all, while Decken couldn't help but despise her even more. After that, since the grinder subjugation was successful, the Lord of Thoria and the military were praised for their deed, because according to the reports, the one who took care of the grinder was the military, and Aldis didn't mind that at all. He just liked his peace more than going through all the trouble, and happy since he got his rewards. Thus, the fact that the army was useless in the battle, and that it was Aldis and mercenaries who fought the grinder, were kept secret from the public. Now at the mansion of the Lord of Thoria, Lord Marquis was sitting on his throne, Costas with Decken in the court. The chief minister asked Decken if he knew why he was called here, which he was already aware of. Costas told him that even if he was given a chance to redeem his honor, he lost his subordinates, and in the end, it was the same female mercenary who took all the credit. Decken begged them for mercy, while the chief minister stated it didn't matter how good his swordsmanship was, if he couldn't achieve anything for them. Lord told Costas they shouldn't discuss more on that matter, since everyone makes one or two mistakes. He said he believed Decken would grow stronger after this incident, and Decken nodded his head in agreement. Lord Marquis mentioned to Decken if he thought that the female mercenary was certainly strong, and if that was the case, it was terrifying for such a strong person to be wandering around without any restraint on her. So, he feared that one day she might interrupt their order, and what's more dangerous was that the female mercenary didn't care or respect Lord Marquis at all. Marquis marked her to be a threat for no reason, and Decken's sheep talked into his words. Furthermore, Marquis got to know that the woman had a companion, who was a rude warrior who refused a personal request from the general in the past. Marquis found it troubling, so he thought of something and stared at Decken. Decken quickly requested them to let him take care of that problem. General told Decken to focus on completing his current mission, or he could just take some time away from his official duties to act freely. Costas also said he could train in that period, and they would give him 6 company soldiers under his command. Marquis told him he was free to use them as he pleased, and this was his last chance to rise in ranks or remain just a platoon leader. After that, Decken got out of the court, and the soldiers around the way were mocking Decken. Decken was scared that his mockery would remain for his lifetime, while Marquis asked Costas if it would be okay to send a whole company to deal with a single mercenary. Costas said sending more than that would be too unnatural and get suspicions on them, so he hoped sending Decken would compensate for their lack of military strength. He remembered that the fort he sent Decken to was currently vacant and could be used for exercise purposes. Costas' plan was to use Decken in reality to deal with the Aldis and Nail, and if he failed to do so, they would just deny having any connection of Decken with the Lord Marquis. So, it would be better for Decken to get positive results, or he might be in some big trouble. Meanwhile, at the home of Aldis, Philia and Rihanna were playing house with each other. They were playing with dolls of father, mother, and 2 sweet little twins, while Aldis looked at them playing peacefully. He wished for things to stay like this forever, but Aldis wasn't sure how long he would be able to protect them. He had earlier thought of sending them each to a different location under apprenticeship, but the 2 of them never wished to separate from each other, and they didn't even like to wear different outfits from one another. They also added Aldis in their little house play, and Aldis couldn't imagine letting these 2 go away from him anymore. He realized that he had gotten softer, and the reason he began thinking like that was that the situation had changed a lot from before. Nowadays, whenever he went to town, he could feel the atmosphere had changed around him, and the shop he used to go for usual things, The shop lady there seemed a bit off about giving him things. After that, he went to get the usual medicines as well, but the guy told Aldi's not to come anymore to his shop. Aldi's was sure about it now that something had definitely happened with the people. Then the innkeeper who allowed him to stay with twins before called him out from behind. Aldi's remembered her, and then the lady informed him that the existence of the twins was exposed to the public. Not only that, the inn lady told him that she usually wouldn't have leaked the secrets of the customers, but when soldiers came to her inn, she had to tell them about him since she would have been in trouble if she lied. And aside from that, the soldiers also asked questions from her customers, so it wasn't like she could have kept it a secret. And Aldi's thanked her for letting him know the reason behind this odd behavior of people around him. He wondered why the military was suddenly investigating him, and the only reason could be something like they lost face. Now that he figured out the reason behind it, he went and talked about it to Ted and others. Norris told him that the reason was clearly Nail, because after she went to the Lord's castle, she caused a great mess for the Lord and others, while also disrespecting them in front of everyone else. Aldi's wished she hadn't done that at all, while Norris added that Aldi's was also to blame since he took the credit for Grinder subjugation as well for the reward. So it was obvious for the military to be on their throats after so many things piled up against them. Norris reasoned that the military must have found out about the twins after checking his background, so it was not anymore on just the level of being watched, but the general, the lord, and platoon leader all have started to take actions against Aldi's. This combination had made him the enemy of the entire nation, so it was now up to Aldi's on planning how to deal with all of this. Now back to the present time when Aldi's was at home. He sighed as he thought that he might need to leave Thoria for good. Then Nail came asking him what was the matter. But as for Aldi's, he was more surprised now to see that Nail could do anything from cooking, cleaning, and even preparing tea for him. She was a real servant, except for her behavior, which was more like a wife. Now back to the serious matter. He informed Nail beforehand that the military have started taking action against them slowly, to which she suggested if she should go and wipe all of them from the earth. He told her not to do that because it would mean that the whole country would be their enemy. Aldi's tried thinking of various alternative solutions, like should he lay low for a while and let the situation calm down, but it was still dangerous considering the Lord of Thoria was involved. Aldi's recalled Nail had met the Lord before, so he asked her what kind of person he was. She replied Marquis was a vile greedy bastard with no sense or whatsoever at all. Aldi's didn't expect Lord himself would be this corrupt, and he actually told Nail to become his plaything while staying close to him all the time. Aldi's asked her about the general, to which she replied he was a mongrel that barked orders, which was no different than a stray dog. Aldi's could totally understand she was right about the general, so thinking about the solution, he told Nail to get ready to leave Thoria at a moment's notice. Later that night, Phobia asked Aldi's what the weird wall-like thing was outside, to which he replied it was a barrier that only keeps the hostile people away. It won't attract attention from outside either. While he left the shopping to Nail, Aldi's fell asleep from having thought so much about many things, and the twins observed he had been sleeping a lot lately. Then they felt a little notorious, so they got outside the home and went towards the town hoping that Aldi's won't get mad at them. Philia wondered if the old man from before would still be there, while thinking that they might get snacks as well. In the end, the twins were just a kid after all, so they couldn't hold their excitement, until Philia stopped because there was someone standing in front of them. It was clearly a person in knight armor with some bad intentions, and after some time, Aldi's realized that the twins were not home, which could only mean they went outside. He felt bad for not predicting this to happen, so he told Nail to hold the house while he looked for them. Nail gave him a letter she found by the front gate, and it was addressed to a female mercenary, which means Nail. Aldi's was shocked after reading the contents of the letter, as it said that this letter was a summon for them to come to the northern fort if they wished to see the twins. Aldi's anger was completely crossed this time, because it was enough that everyone was just about hate twins, kill twins, and all that. Nail apologized for her situation to have dragged twins into it as well, to which he replied it wasn't her fault but his to be so naive. Aldi's felt like he should have known that he couldn't keep the existence of twins hidden forever, and the time he thought he had for planning something for it was already over since he knew firsthand how disgusting those people were. Nail asked him to give her an order, whereas for Aldi's, he knew that he didn't have time to ask or discuss it with Norris or others. He also left those people alone who worship goddess and believe sick things, but now if it was a fight those bastards wanted, Aldi's was ready to give them hell instead, just like they asked for it by taking the twins. Aldi's didn't wanted to break his promise to herself to protect those twins, and now he wanted to make sure to engrave the very warning in the hearts of those enemies. It turned out that the one to kidnap the twins was Deccan, who had a secret plan in mind to win the next battle he knew was coming. Decken went into the basement inside his house, and after stepping down the stairs, there was a locker room where many valuable artifacts and other equipment were kept. Decken came here specifically for a sword which belonged to his ancestors, who also used to be a soldier back then. He heard from his predecessors that his ancestors seemed to have participated in a defensive battle which everyone thought would end in his defeat. But ultimately in the end, Decken's ancestor came out victorious, which led him to be promoted to general. Decken was told when he was young that he should never wield this sword, unless he was driven back into a corner as a last resort. Decken thought he must use this sword now as it was a better time than ever, and so he wielded this sword hoping to win against Nail now. However, the power that comes along with this sword had a price for it. However, he mentioned that this was where the two of those kidnapped children might come to use, so he took 5 rings along with the sword and headed out for the fort. The fort was filled with hundreds of soldiers stationed everywhere, as everyone was told to be ready for battle. Aldis and Nail arrived at the fort as well, and Nail asked him what their plan was. She thought he might suggest considering negotiation, but this time, he didn't want to forgive them at all even if they begged for it at any cost. He wanted to show them what a fight with him truly meant, to pick a fight with him. Aldis made a boulder, and while he was doing that, one of the soldiers noticed him from the washing towers. The soldiers were astounded to witness that Aldis and Nail really did come alone, which made them think they were looking down on the army. The soldiers took it as a shame, so they told everyone to take their positions, and not to let their guards down just because there were 2 people. The soldiers didn't think these 2 would be as strong as they were told, so they could just observe the final moment of these mercenaries. The soldiers commanded themselves to open the gate, but before anyone could move an inch, the whole wall including the gate broke down from a blast. Once the dust settled down, the soldiers were left damned to see that suddenly huge rocks flew towards them and crushed these walls. However, it was not only the wall which was crushed, because Aldis and Nail also arrived there after they just broke all the formations of the soldiers. Aldis entered the fort with an angry look in their eyes, and soldiers still thought they would stand a chance even after that. Nail noticed Decken right away because she knew who he was, and just like that, Decken also warned Nail and Aldis they wouldn't make it out alive. Aldis asked Nail if this Decken was the one she mentioned earlier, and she agreed to that. Decken was standing while smirking to see Aldis, and Nail didn't run away. Then before Decken could speak anything else, he got grazed by the sword thrown by Aldis. The sword left a slight cut on Decken's neck, which made Decken panic and shout out what the hell Aldis just did. Aldis told him it was just the starting, as he won't let the ones who put their hands on the twins with just a graze. Decken shouted he was the one with the upper hand here, as he commanded all the archers to aim and shoot at Aldis without missing. The archers followed the order, and Decken declared this would be the last time for him having to look at the unpleasant face of Nail. Aldis and Nail didn't care a bit about the arrows coming at them, since it was just one-hand task for Nail to swirl all the arrows around, while Aldis used his magic to launch a counterattack by twisting metal blades formed by his magic. The metal pieces went straight into the walls and left a big crack into the wall, which led the whole wall to shake and fall apart. The dozen of archers on that wall tried to evacuate, but it was no use, and thus 1/4 of the soldiers were taken care of. Decken didn't expect Aldis' power to be this terrifying, and Aldis told him it was just one part of the wall, and next would be the whole fort, and soon everyone present here would find themselves under a mountain of rubble. Aldis asked for them to give him the twins back, but Decken didn't want to admit defeat at any cost. So next, he commanded sorcerers to attack next on Aldis, and their spells combined were surely stronger than any average attack. But for Nail and Aldis, it was an easy block with their magic barriers. Nail told them it was pointless, while Decken couldn't stand to see Nail was still unharmed. He told the soldiers they were fighting against a woman who was in the end just a sorcerer. So next he sent the close combat soldiers before Nail could use magic attack. The close combat unit marched towards Aldis and Nail, but they were just unaware of how excellent Aldis and Nail were even in close combat, which was actually their main suit. Aldis told Nail that he won't be able to hold back this time, so he warned soldiers to come at him only if they had no attachment with their life. He used his sword magic to cut off the hands of those who wielded swords against him, and as for those with spears, Aldis dodged them and cut off their legs without showing any signs of mercy. He kept up this brutal combat, killing one soldier after another, and Nail did the same on the other side. Soldiers were starting to think that taking down those 2 would be good for their merits indeed, so it was a pretty good chance for soldiers to be promoted. Aldis noticed that soldiers were charging at him with greed for promotion, and for them, All these gave them death stares. He made it clear to not show any pity to them, so all these beheaded those soldiers, which left a bad example for others to keep on the offense. At this point, all these and Nail had killed so many soldiers that nobody was willing to charge and get their life wasted just like that. Decken could not only see the fear other soldiers were facing, but also feel it himself while all these stepped forward and jumped straight above Decken. Decken understood that this guy was the real deal, while all these landed behind Decken and proved his strength, which made all the numbers advantages seem meaningless before him. All these was standing in front of Decken with his sword magic flowing around in the swords, and he asked Decken if he wanted him to destroy the ground beneath them or what, to make him give the twins back to him. Decken desperately yelled that he wasn't scared of the threats from a guy who defied the military. He considered both Aldis and Nail to be criminals, and also that they don't have a place within Thoria anymore. Aldis told him he was the criminal here, and it was surprising to see Decken could utter such words even after kidnapping innocent children. Decken said he took the twins, not some innocent children, and everyone knows that the existence of twins was filthy in itself, and a sin declared by the goddess. Aldis had enough of this nonsense again, because just because someone was born twin it didn't mean they were sinners. Not only that, Aldis shouted just who the hell was goddess to decide the suffering of others, and he rejected such things, along with the people who believed goddess words. He wondered just how many twins may have lived miserable lives up until now just because of this goddess, and if he couldn't save the ones he had, Aldis wanted to save the ones in front of him. Aldis considered all of these goddess believers as his enemies, and declared a war against all of those, be it army or a lord of any place. Decken called him a lowly mercenary to defy them to the bitter end. Aldis and Decken entered a clash of swords with each other, and Aldis felt something wasn't right. He got pushed back from the block of Decken, which caught Aldis by a little surprise because his sword was imbued with magic, so it should have cut the sword of Decken. The only explanation here was that Decken's sword was also imbued with magic. Decken warned Aldis that he would now experience the power of this demonic sword passed down his family, with his own flesh. Aldis tried assessing Decken's move in the sword while, and it seemed that Decken's physical abilities were also improved, although he didn't feel anything different except the time when Decken attacked. Aldis started to strategize while throwing some fake-offs, and Decken deflected them with his sword while telling Aldis that his sword magic was just magic in the end, so it won't be much against real power. Aldis moved back with agility, and decided to go for another approach as he formed some sharp rocks with magic and threw them at Decken. Decken quickly held his sword straight and it started to absorb all the rocks, or to be more precise, the sword absorbed Aldis's magic. Now Decken made his move and swung his sword with magic release. Upon clashing it against Aldis' sword, Aldis noticed that his sword magic was also being absorbed by this longsword, so he quickly broke off the contact by stepping back. Decken didn't want to let Aldis take a breather, so he unleashed a long-range magic slash from his sword. Aldis used his magic barrier to block it, but to his surprise, his barrier shattered from that blow and the attack went past from his side. Aldis got a little grazed and saw his blood dripping from his cheek. He now had a good grasp that Decken's sword absorbs offensive magic attacks and the magic from weapons as well, then converts it into offensive power in return. Aldis noticed Decken's sword was not glowing anymore, which made him think that magic must have run out, so in that case, he decided to continue the fight but without using any magic this time, and defeat Decken with pure swordsmanship. Decken laughed as if it was a joke to think he could be defeated in swordsmanship. Then Aldis reminded him that he himself was never a sorcerer in the first place. Decken and Aldis got in another clash with their blades releasing loud sounds, and as the sword fight continued, Aldis tried to find a good opening, but Decken was somehow able to catch up with his movements and tactics. But then Aldis took advantage of what he had better than Decken: the speed. Aldis was just about to put a scar on Decken, but Decken blocked it with the back of his sword, and to Aldis' surprise, he got pushed back again. Aldis had been avoiding imbuing his sword with magic so far, but even if he fought with magic, his sword would break in no time. He decided to put all his focus into overwhelming Decken with his speed, and landed a series of multiple slashes with a fraction of a second's gap. Decken had a hard time keeping his foot, so he eventually got pushed back despite blocking all these attacks. Once he got pushed back into a corner, Decken became desperate, so he released more powers of his sword, which he was keeping as his trump card. Aldis was astounded and left to think just where Decken was getting all this magic power from. Decken didn't delay any second to hit Aldis with his sword's magic power, and since it was a direct hit on Aldis, he had to use multiple barriers to barely make it unharmed out of them. Decken shouted to Aldis to keep thinking where his magic came from, while Decken would finish him. Then Nail showed up from behind Decken and did a surprise attack on his back. But before Decken could even notice it, his long sword absorbed her attack. Nail didn't expect this, while Decken remembered she was his prime target, so he should finish her off first. He attacked Nail with the same attack from before, and she couldn't process how he got this stronger from before. All these tried to approach Decken from his blind spot, but Decken noticed him and shifted his attack at all these. All these managed to dodge it, but this amount of magic was surely not coming from Decken himself. Then he heard sounds of someone screaming, and one of the sorcerers from the soldier's army was suffering in extreme pain from his magical power being drained so rapidly. The guy was looking so miserable, and all these didn't see anyone who had this kind of drain ever before. He noticed that he had a ring which seemed to be on the suffering sorcerer's hand, and after putting things together, all these understood that the sword was actually getting the magical power from the sorcerer through that draining ring. Other sorcerers asked Decken what was this about, because all they were told was that their magic powers would be amplified from that ring. Decken told them to shut up and be of some use this way at least. After all, he believed that some sacrifices would become a great asset in defeating these rebels. The sorcerer declined because he wasn't some object human, whereas Decken put the magical output to full release, which made even more sorcerers wearing those rings suffer extreme pain and drain from their head to toes. Nail could also see that Decken was brutally using his allies, to which Decken replied that if she didn't like that, then she was free to just die, since she would eventually be at his hands now or later. Nail refused that none of what Decken was thinking would happen. Then Decken smirked as he mentioned her if she was sure about it. They all knew he was plotting something, and that was when Decken explained the role of the rings, and he had 5 rings in total. He had set 3 rings with a limit because they were on military people, while the remaining 2 rings didn't have any limit. Nail and all these caught up on what Decken was trying to say about those 2 rings, as Decken himself admitted that those 2 rings were set in the fingers of the twins. So right now, those twins were fighting for their life against that continuous drainage of magic, because of which they couldn't just sit idle and keep crying their necks out loud. They wished all these would come and help them get out of this painful state. Decken warned all these that the more he resisted, the more magical power would be drained out of those twins, and if he really cared about their lives, then he should just give up and get killed by him quickly. Nail called Decken a scum, whereas all these couldn't tolerate just how rotten this guy was through and through. Decken released more magic power in his next attack, but instead of going on rampage, all these knew that he must remain calm and think of how to get out of this situation. He knew that one wrong move here would only put the twins in more danger, and Nail also asked him if they should retreat for now. All these said he was sure these guys won't let the twins live if he retreated, so fighting this bastard Decken right now was their only choice. Decken wasn't showing any signs of stopping the flow of magical power, but suddenly the sword's magic stopped by itself. All these assessed that the flow of magical power was cut off, whereas Decken quickly looked at the sorcerers who had apparently removed the rings from their fingers. Decken asked just who allowed them to remove the fingers, but it was clear that sorcerers did it out of their own free will. Decken told them that they would regret this later on, while he had to fight off all these and Nail for now. Nail mentioned that Decken doesn't have the trust of even his subordinates. Decken didn't care that he lost just 3 of those idiots. Nail reported to all these that the efficiency of that long sword drops when the magic supplying target was too far, which meant that the twins must be somewhere within the fort. She decided to distract Decken while all these could rescue the twins, but all these knew that he should be the one to distract him because after all, he had a bigger supply of magical power than her. All these formed a very large scale of sharp rocks in the air and shot all of them at Decken at once. Decken rendered his attack useless since his sword just absorbed all of the magic attacks. Nail understood that all these was actually trying to fill the long sword with magic so it won't need any from those twins, and quickly went on her way to find and rescue the twins in the fort. Decken didn't want to let her get away, so all these throwed more rocks to block Decken's path. All these told him to stay focused on his main opponent, which was him, and meanwhile, in the prison chambers, the painful cries of the twins could be heard all around the place. They were just children, and seeing them suffering this much was causing an unsettling feeling to even the soldiers stationed outside. They didn't like how much these twins were suffering, just because they were abominable children. He felt their pain because these children were no different in age than his little daughter, but to be called sinners, they must do their duty. The other soldier asked him what were they even doing right now, by locking up young and innocent children in a prison cell. The first soldier had nothing to say, because they knew no matter how they felt, the superiors won't let it slide if they don't follow their orders. Suddenly, the sounds of twins stopped coming, which shocked the soldier, and he quickly turned back to check them. he saw that the twins were close to death, and their eyes were crying non-stop for hours. The soldier couldn't help but pity those poor children asking him for help. Then the second soldier called him out and said they should start taking turns, starting with the first soldier taking a break. He stated it should be fine, since everyone needs to take a break once in a shift for toilet and other things, so he asked the first soldier for the key and went on break. The first soldier understood what he was trying to say, so he asked the second soldier instead to take a break, and he told him that he knows what the second soldier was trying to do here, which was actually to release the children and take responsibility for it. So the first soldier stated he would take the full responsibility for this instead. The second soldier said he couldn't let him be the good guy alone here because it was his idea, but either way, those soldiers wanted to stop the pain these twins were suffering from. They noticed that the ring on their thumbs looked suspicious, and that must be why they were suffering. Meanwhile, Decan was continuously making use of his magic attacks of the long sword, while Aldis was keeping himself protected and providing his magical power intentionally to the sword at the same time. It was hard for him to keep going like this, but he had no other choice. Decan laughed since he was enjoying this moment to see the ones responsible for his shame suffer in front of his eyes, and when he understood that Aldis was trying to save twins by providing his magical energy, he told him this was a stupid idea to begin with because having concern for those filthy twins was useless. He asked Aldis if those twins were really that important to him, to which Aldis asked in return if this nonsense about the goddess was that important to him or not. He asked what sins did those two twins committed to be treated like that, but Decan was more inclined about how dare Aldis called the goddess nonsense. Decan believed in everything goddess said. Aldis told him that was plain trash to follow someone else's words that blindly. He told him that they had no right to call the twins filthy, when he was himself the filth here with no pride at all. Decan took it personal to be spoke so lowly about his pride. Aldis got on his nerves, and now Decan wanted to sacrifice everything just to make Aldis regret his actions by killing those twins. He decided to use every ounce of magic the long sword could release at once, so for that, he targeted to drain twins' magic to the last ounce of it. Aldis knew this was a straight kill for the twins and he must stop it. But Decan had already set the sword's limit on those twins to finish and said that Nail going there would be a failure after all despite Aldis' efforts to distract him. Aldis told him to stop, but it was no use because Decan was clearly not the kind to listen to anyone except for himself. He used full release of the long sword, and to his shock, the sword started absorbing magic from Decan instead. Decan started suffering the immense pain he made the other five go through, as the sword was now draining him alone. He wondered why this was happening, because the rings must be doing their thing. Aldis was thankful for this miracle, and even if he didn't know what was going on, he took this chance to kill Decan by piercing through his heart and ending this fight at once. Decan couldn't react to his attack this time, and thus he ended up coughing a lot of blood and then died. His body was lying on the ground and Aldis thought he could finally go and rescue Philia and Rihanna. He turned to look for them hoping they would be safe, and it was when the long sword of Decan started glowing brightly. Aldis saw that the magical power of the sword was going to explode, and in the next moment the whole castle started to blow up from that release. Some minutes ago, the soldiers of Philia and Rihanna's prison were wondering what they should do with these rings. They thought of reporting later on that the rings just fell off after kids collapsed, but removing the shackles was surely something that would get them in trouble. That was the time when the explosion's impact started shaking the ceiling of the prison, and they realized they should get out of there right away. So, the soldiers tried to remove the shackles of twins, but they had no time left as the prison started to shatter. The soldiers decided to guard the twins with their bodies rather than running away, and thus the fort kept falling apart for some minutes. After that, the survivors were quickly getting the injured ones on safe sides, while Aldis managed to survive the crash with his magic barrier. He didn't expect the explosion would be this big, so he quickly went to check out Nail and the twins. He went to the lower prison place, and after calling out for everyone's name, he heard Nail respond back and report that the twins seemed to be fine. He was thankful for them to be safe. Then Nail added that by the time she arrived here, the twins were under the rubble with those two soldiers who made sure the twins would be safe by protecting them with their bodies. She wasn't completely sure if the soldiers really protected them or had something else in mind, but their doubts were cleared when they saw that the rings were removed from the fingers of twins. Aldis put all the pieces together, and he respected the soldiers for their sacrifice. Later on, Nail asked Aldis what he planned on doing now, to which he replied that they would be leaving the town right away since the military was sure to be after them again. He figured that they should head towards the royal capital Gran, which was much larger than Thoria and also had a bigger information gathering capability. He still wished he could find some clues about his comrades there as well, and he asked Nail if she still wanted to tag along with him. Nail admitted she was indeed staying loyal to him for her life. Hearing all these sighed, and he was quite grateful that Nail was there to help him sort this situation out after all. He had earlier thought he could manage things alone and not get anyone involved. But now after this incident, and seeing the look on Philia's face, all these understood that having Nail was important for him to assure the safety of twins. He smiled and asked her to keep following him, while feeling the warmth in his hands he needs to protect. After that, they first went to the forest of Causes, where Nail was standing still on the lake, as a mysterious enemy lurking within the lake attacked her. Aldi's was watching her fight, whereas Nail seemed to have been caught by that monster. Aldi's told the worried twins to not panic, she would be back soon after finishing it. They arrived at Causes forest some time ago, and it was on their way to the royal capital from Thoria on foot. Nail asked him if they weren't going to the capital, to which he replied that he was waiting to see how the incident on Thoria would get reported. He mentioned that they might even be forced to leave this country, which won't be that surprising after what they did. He wished he could have gotten at least little time to explain things to Ted and others. But anyway, he thought of a good spot for them to stay temporarily, and he noticed the twins were still scared from that incident, and clinging to him. Aldi's assured them not to worry since he won't let anything like that happen again. He requested them not to ever sneak out again without telling him, and so, he used his magic to cut the wood around them, and twins saw that he made the area more open and brighter than before now. He asked Nail to take care of any dangerous monsters around them, while making sure to hunt some animals for their meals. Nail went out like she was asked to, and now Aldi said to the twins that he would build a house now. The twins were excited to know how he would do that, and Aldi started by making the foundation of the house. He uprooted the trees in a certain area and then used his earth magic to build a flat foundation. After that, he processed the wood he cut into making a house real quick. But at the same time, a monster appeared from behind the bushes, and when it was about to attack Aldi's, a sword stabbed the monster to death while making sure the construction of the house wouldn't be interrupted. Twins were watching the process with curiosity and joy, and soon enough, the house making was done. However, it looked like a shed, and Aldi's thought that he should improve the shape of this house a little. At the same time, Nail came back from her hunt, and she brought some hunted animals like Aldi's asked of her. She reported to Aldi's that there weren't many dangerous monsters, so they could now start preparing the meals. Aldi's was ready with that idea, then he sensed something behind them in the lake. There were bubbles popping up from the water, and Nail also sensed there was a bit of magical power coming from whatever it was within the water. A monster with thick roots as its limbs soon came out from the water, which scared the twins, while the monster aimed for the bears hunted by Nail. It took them along with it in the water, and Aldi's told her that this monster seemed to be large based on the shadow. Nail observed that Aldi's was occupied with the twins, so she took the responsibility to take down this monster, and thus she engaged with it without any fear. Nail saw that this monster was quite loud and disgusting to look at, so without any delay, she used her ice magic to freeze the roots binding her and break them. The monster screamed in pain after feeling hurt from its limbs being destroyed. Nail wanted to be finished with it quickly, so for the upcoming attacks of this monster, she blocked them with her magic barrier, and at the same time, she aimed right at the center of this monster. However, the monster moved its limbs in a manner which made it hard for Nail to attack. She realized that this monster seemed to have some intelligence. Nail thought of how to end this quickly, and because using her light magic won't be effective while she was in water, she still wished to finish this monster as rapidly. Nail decided to take this monster out of the lake first, and thus she shot her light magic not on the monster, but on the ground beside it. The monster flew from the impact of her attack, and soon, it came out from its territory. Nail took this perfect chance to attack, so she froze the monster and then applied heat magic at the same time to burn it underwater. Aldi saw the monster coming out from the water, and soon it was pierced by multiple light magic beams which undoubtedly belonged to Nail, and the monster was crushed completely. Its blood splattered all over the lake, and soon Nail came out from the lake, soaked with red water all over her. She informed Aldi's that the water around here had become unusable for them. But they couldn't move from here now that Aldi's already built a home, and he decided to create the water through their magic. He made sure to let her know that even if she was dependable, she should prioritize protecting the twins first from now on, while he would do all the fighting. Nail obeyed his order like usual, and then Aldi's felt like he should ask her to tell him more about herself, what her goal was, or at least why she chose to serve him. He knew that he hadn't told her about himself either. Then Nail replied that the reason she served him was similar to why sun and moons exist. She believed it was a natural occurrence like that, whereas all these hoped he could have gotten a non-cryptic answer. Nail stated she just answered his question, and if he was unsatisfied with it, he should make his questions more clear. All these had something to ask her for a while, so he asked if she would choose to serve him because she knew something about him. Nail replied that all she knew about him was his strength, which she witnessed personally, and nothing aside from that. He said if he assumes it being true, it would still make sense for her to at least be curious about him. All these asked her if she was fine serving someone she knew nothing about, to which she replied that her mission was to find the strongest lord to serve, and aside from that matter everything else was trivial to her. After saying that, she went to stay on watch, while Philia asked Aldis if they could sleep since it was night time already. Aldis was with the twins, and he looked at Nail being committed to her orders as usual. Aldis knew he could believe Nail's words, and he also felt that she was the resident of this world unlike him. However, her power was quite close to his, but the difference between her and Aldis was that she was born on this side, while Aldis turned out to be from another world, a foreigner. He thought that he might not be able to understand anything about his current situation though Nail, which meant he was still at square one. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, some liquid-type things were stuck in various places on the trees with a building which clearly looked like it had been there for centuries. After that, they were able to spend some days in peace, and Aldis figured that enough time must have passed by now. So, he got ready and told the twins that he would be heading out for a bit, and come back as soon as he could. The twins agreed to him, and then Aldis told Nail that he would leave the home and the kids in her care. She agreed to accept the order, and thus they said bye to Aldis. Philia and Rihanna decided to play in the yard, and they asked Nail if she would play with them as well. Nail hadn't played with children before, but she agreed to the twins to play together and asked what they would be playing. The twins decided to play house, while Aldis made his way to the capital of the kingdom of Nagras, Gran. It was also the largest city of the kingdom, boasting a population of 300,000. This city had flourished since ancient times through trade, and it was now a place where people, products, and all sorts of things were found which made the kingdom flourish just by itself. And there, in one of the food places of this city, a young information broker named Cesar sat down all the time while attending to his customers. Another customer came to him, and this time he was here to thank him for the good quality of information. After that, Aldis also came to Cesar asking if he was the information broker, and Cesar agreed he was right about it. Aldis took a seat without introducing himself to Cesar, to which Aldis replied that it wasn't necessary, and then he asked Cesar how much he would pay for some information he was looking for. Cesar was keen, as he asked what kind of information Aldis was seeking. Aldis replied he wanted to know some information on the woman who frequently appears on the highway of Thoria, whereas Cesar was trying to analyze Aldis since this was a topic not everyone asked about. He guessed that Aldis must be 14 or 15 years old, and might be a new mercenary looking to make a male for himself, but somewhat looked experienced. Cesar told him that this information would cost 5 copper coins, which was pretty cheap, since it had been a long time since the incident. Aldis handed him 5 copper, and Cesar informed him that she used to appear down the road, and challenge mercenaries with a single knife, but always win. Her age was said to be around 18, and both her identities and purpose were unknown. Cesar added that she stopped showing up some time ago now, and from the change of expression on Aldis's face, he thought he was disappointed, until Aldis asked him if he was able to track her down. Cesar stopped him there and said any extra information would also cost extra, like 5 silver coins. Aldis gave him 5 silver coins without any hesitation, and this behavior raised some doubts in Cesar's mind. Cesar asked Aldis if he was aware about the Thoria's grinder incident, to which Aldis agreed, and then Cesar added that the woman was said to have participated in that grinder subjugation, and there she made considerable achievements. Cesar told him that other information brokers don't know about this yet, and she was mainly disappeared around 5 days ago. He asked him if he had any idea about where she might have gone, to which Cesar replied he was clueless about it. All he knew other than this information was that there were a large number of casualties recently in northern Fort of Thoria, and according to the rumors he heard, this woman seemed to have been involved in it as well. Not only that, but Cesar also kept the information that this woman was said to be accompanied by a black-haired man. Suddenly, Cesar realized that Aldis matched that description quite well, and the change in his expression made Aldis ask him if there was something wrong. Cesar said it was nothing, but he just thought if he had anything else to share since he already got 5 silver coins. Aldis got up and told Cesar that he would be waiting here for him tomorrow before afternoon, after which Aldis went upstairs seeming to have signed in this inn to stay today. Cesar was curious about Aldis, so he asked the innkeeper if that guy was staying here today. The innkeeper agreed to him, then Cesar asked for his name, for which the innkeeper demanded 1 silver coin. Cesar paid him the silver, and the innkeeper informed him that the guy registered his name as Tyrios, whereas Aldis was also doing his own thing, since he was also doubtful of Cesar, which was obvious because his information was much more accurate than other information brokers. The fact that Cesar also knew about Nail leaving Thoria could prove to be dangerous, although he thought Cesar might not know about him and Nail being the one to fight against that military of Thoria, as that event was passed on just as an accident. It was natural that they hold a grudge against Aldis and Nail by now, but at least they haven't made them being their enemies official because of shame. And for some reason, Aldis thought that Cesar was still holding on to a piece of information, which he guessed that he might have to ask him tomorrow. Next day, Cesar informed him that the woman had made an enemy out of the Thoria's army, and it was said that the accident they got into was in reality a battle which took place with her involved in it. The battle had many casualties, including a commanding officer and a few sorcerers and soldiers. Aldis was thinking that the information from him was surely accurate, while other information brokers only know that an accident occurred. Cesar stated that it was possible that the woman fled after that battle against the army. Aldis asked him if this information was accurate, to which he admitted that he even took a day to verify it. And other than him, it was possible only for the National Intelligence Agency who might know of something as well. Aldis figured it had been 6 days now since that battle, so unless Thoria hadn't deliberately manipulated the news, it was something that should have spread all over the country. So, it was only reasonable that the Thoria army didn't make it public. However, he doubted that Cesar had told him almost everything, except mentioning Aldis himself being there, because it was surely odd for Cesar to not have heard about him anytime between that grinder subjugation to this accident while he had been there all the time with her. Aldis wanted to maintain some precautions, so he decided to give bait to Cesar and check if he took it. So, Aldis got up, mentioning this much information was plenty, so now he would go and join his companion, as they were planning to leave the capital in the afternoon. Aldis got up and said see you again to Cesar, while Cesar politely replied if the time comes they would meet again, while giving off a fake smile. After that, while Aldis was in his way, suddenly some people called him out and asked him to stop. They were a group of mercenaries who seemed to have come here to capture him. Aldis stated he don't remember doing anything to be captured, to which the guys replied that someone else wanted him to be captured regardless, and so they ambushed at Aldis all at once, but Aldis easily broke their weapons in a single gust, after which he immobilized them with close combat fight. Aldis warned attackers that he didn't even need to draw his sword against them, and then he warned them to spit out the name of the guy who hired them, otherwise they would die. The attacker told him it was damn Cesar who sent them after Aldis. Aldis knew where to go next, so while Cesar was sitting in the same place and happily drinking, the innkeeper asked him what was so good about today. Cesar was talking to himself in thoughts, that the guy who called him Tyrios was really Aldis who had teamed up with that female mercenary, which meant that he would surely know where to find that female mercenary. Cesar had planned to find her whereabouts and then sell that information to the Lord of Thoria, who must be willing to pay a hefty sum for that information. Cesar thought of moving to a nicer new home with that money and changing his lifestyle. Then he got called out by a familiar voice, which was shocking for Cesar, since it was Aldis who was totally unscathed. Cesar asked him why he was here when he was supposed to have left the capital, to which Aldis replied that was his intention at first, but the bad manners of Cesar was what brought Aldis here again. Aldis gave Cesar the helmet of the guy who came to attack Aldis but ran away. Cesar was shocked to see this turn of events, because he knew that the guys he sent after Aldis were surely skilled. Aldis warned Cesar that being greedy won't end well for him, and there won't be a second time. Cesar understood that Aldis was not just bluffing, and then Aldis asked Cesar for some information, the one he had been holding back. Cesar asked for 2 silver coins for the information, and Aldis gave them to him as usual. After that, Cesar informed him that the news of the incident at the fort had already spread in Thoria, and it wouldn't be long before it reached the capital as well. Cesar confirmed that the Lord of Thoria had not made anything public, but he didn't want to leave the ones who tarnished his image. Aldis understood that there must be mercenaries who might have already begun searching for him, and Cesar could be one of them. Cesar stated he was just selling information for money, and the information he got about the ones who annihilated the army at the fort was that they were defeated by just 2 people, a young female mercenary and a young man wearing a violet cloth. He stated that those 2 were said to have more companions, and Aldis couldn't simply underestimate the skills of Cesar as an informant. But that was not all, until Cessair mentioned that the Thoria Lord was not interested in the twins but just the two mercenaries. Aldis was shocked to hear the words about the twins, and he asked Cessair if this was all. Cessair said this was all the information he had, and when Cessair asked him about the next subject, Aldis slammed his fist on the table and threatened Cessair that if he ever disclosed the information on the twins, then he would personally track Cessair down to the ends of the earth and kill him. Cessair felt this one more scary than before, as he spoke up in a trembling voice that such information was bound to spread soon, so his threat won't make sense. Aldis didn't care how it sounded, but he wanted to keep Cessair on a leash, because he didn't trust him at all. And the fact that his information broker talent was undeniable made him even more worthy in Aldis' eyes. He told Cessair a facade that the mercenaries who fought Thoria army appeared at the capital 3 days ago, and then they left for the Empire. Cessair asked him what he meant by that, to which Aldis told him that he was simply providing information to Cessair. Cessair didn't like to be forced to spread fake information, and if he didn't, then Aldis' threats for killing him was always an option. Cessair didn't guarantee this would go as Aldis thought, but Aldis just wanted to make sure to decrease any chances of anything similar to that fort incident happening to twins. He wondered if he should escape to somewhere more distant. Then Cessair spoke up and asked Aldis if he was really as strong as the rumors said about him. He should go and make a big name for himself by defeating the 3 great demons. He said that proving it out loud that nobody was his match might get him what he wanted, and the mention of these 3 demons piqued his interest. For the 3 great demons, Cessair asked him for just 1 copper coin since everyone around here knew about them. The 3 demons started with first the Bell Seeker, which had a territory at the foot of the Cannabis mountain range, and it was a rare mutation of the lesser monster Tron, and had the strength comparable to the grinder and said to be attracted by the sound of bells. Aldis mentioned that if it was really as strong as a grinder, then that could be subjugated at any moment. Cessair mentioned there was something not right in his logic. Then Cessair told him if he were to defeat those 3 monsters, then the country would be overjoyed. The second demon was called the 4 Wings, which had a nest on a small island near the royal capital. It was a giant bird monster with 2 heads and 4 wings, and it wreaked havoc in the nearby waters, but the country was not getting time to subjugate it due to the state of tension with the Empire. Cessair told him that even defeating one of those would make him to be considered as a hero. Then Aldis asked him about the last demon. Cessair stated that there wasn't much known about the last demon, and it was rumored to be residing in the forest of Caucasus, named the Red Eater. Aldis asked why it was just rumored, to which Cessair replied that nobody who encountered it had survived. People only said that it comes out on the night of the full moon, and a sole witness of it was a strong swordsman who came out of the forest with terrible wounds, with being on the brink of death. That swordsman uttered 2 words before he took the last breath: read and eaten. It was also observed that on the night of a full moon, the forest of Caucasus was loud with the sounds of monsters running around, which was most likely to be the Red Eater they were running from. The people who have witnessed those monsters running away confirmed that the monsters were running without paying any attention to them, as if they were frightened by something. Afterwards, most of the people who have gone to the forest on full moon have never returned. That was all they knew about the Red Eater, so Aldis mentioned it could be just a speculation. Cessair stated there wasn't much known to say anything to confirm, so he just included Red Eater because 3 great demons sounded better than 2. Aldis came back to the main topic. If setting Red Eater aside, getting rid of the other 2 would make his name big in the capital. Cessair agreed with him and also added that no normal human would ever want to mess with such a strong monster. Aldis thought that he should do it for the twins, because whether or not Thoria were after twins, they were still hurt by them once. So, if being with Aldis was the safest place for them, he figured that standing out might not be a bad idea after all. He asked Cessair if he would be here in the evening, and once Cessair said yes, Aldis told him he would see him in the evening since it would be over by then. Cessair just noticed evening, so he agreed, but then he noticed the later part and wondered what the hell Aldis just said. Now first, in the areas of the mountains, some adventurers seemed to be going for a request, and they were relaxed because all they knew was that bell seekers only react to the sound of metal. They couldn't help but go this way because the request they had for medicinal herbs could only be found in these parts, so he assured others at the same time that they wouldn't likely meet any tragedy. Then one of them slipped on their foot, and when they noticed, the guy's luggage created a metal sound, as it got stuck to a bell which was attached to the skeleton of a dead person. Others figured it must have been someone who tried to subjugate the Bell Seeker, but because of this dead guy, now they were all about to die because the Bell Seeker arrived from the sound of the bell. All the adventurers were now doomed as they knew the Bell Seeker wouldn't let them live for long. So when the Bell Seeker charged towards one of them, Others tried to do all they could to stop the demon, but none of what they did was even able to stop or put a scratch on the Bell Seeker, since its body was too hard. The Bell Seeker throwed the swordsman with a shield with just a strike, and it also crushed the shield with its heavy fangs. None of them had any energy to fight or hope that they could make it alive. Then at that moment, all these finally arrived and throwed his sword at the Bell Seeker. He was a bit thankful to be able to find the Bell Seeker without having to lure it using a bell. And now it was a fight of all these against one of the three great demons. The adventurers tried to warn all these to stay away from this dangerous monster, to which all these mentioned that he already knew that while he jumped down the rift. Bell Seeker didn't wait to attack all these right away, and all these didn't hold back this time even if there were people watching him. He cut off one of the Bell Seeker's legs without any trouble, and the adventurers were amazed by his incredible strength. The Bell Seeker fell down and all these wanted to finish this beast quickly. Then the Bell Seeker let out a roar, and to everyone's surprise, it regenerated its leg in almost no time and disappeared from their line of sight. But for all these, he could easily catch up with the invisibility of a Bell Seeker, so he moved around while sending the magical energy of it. The adventurers were getting to see a fight on a level they hadn't witnessed before. All these took a stance, and while he aimed at the Bell Seeker with concentration, all these tracked its movements and stabbed it successfully with his sword. All these stabbed the beast in his mouth to immobilize it, after which all he had to do was to chop its whole body into such tiny pieces that it wouldn't be able to regenerate. The adventurers could only see the swords of all these flying, with his sword magic cutting the Bell Seeker like daily meat. All these left the head of the Bell Seeker intact because he wanted to keep it as proof that he finished it off. And thinking that might not be enough, all these next burned the rest of the monster's body into ashes. He figured this should have done the job, and everything he did was witnessed by those adventurers up close. After that, all these just took the head of the Bell Seeker and went off to the next one. One of the adventurers asked him for his name, and he proudly introduced himself as Aldi's and left. Next, he went to the skies with his flying magic and reached the island around the royal capital, which was said to be home to the next great demon. While he was assessing the area around him, Aldi's noticed something in the sky instead as a large shadow suddenly attacked him. Aldi's managed to dodge it and realized that this large bird must be the Four Wings monster, since the description matched perfectly along with it. This monster was larger than Aldi's expected, but he didn't have any time to think since the monster was not going to wait for him and attacked. Aldi's dodged the next one, and he noticed that the monster started to focus magic around its wings. The Four Wings launched a wind magic attack at Aldi's, and he blocked it with the magic barrier. Aldi's figured that this attack might make it a little tough for him to get closer to the Four Wings, so he strategized to rain down fire spears on its wings. But his spells didn't reach that far to even make contact with the beast. While the Four Wings charged up itself, and unexpectedly for Aldi's, the monster released high voltages of electric shocks at him. Aldi's figured it was similar to the light magic which reached its target instantly, but it was a little hard to tell where the electric shocks would come from. He kept trying to dodge it, but the electric attacks circled around his magic barrier all the time. He understood why ships weren't able to endure this beast's attacks, and to defeat it, he wanted to close the distance. He wanted to first make those electric attacks trackable for him, so Aldi's dived straight downward into the sea and used his fire magic to heat it up so much as to generate steam. The steam surrounded the Four Wings just like he planned, and now Aldi's could easily track the next electric attacks. He threw his swords and made sure to control them with magic to land some of the wings of the Four Wings. He got successful in landing some damage, after which Aldi's throwed another sword, and this time, he completely cut off one of the wings of the monster. Four Wings started to scream in pain, while Aldi's had already prepared for his next attack. The Four Wings were trying to settle down in the air with its remaining wings, but before it could do that, Aldi's came dashing straight up and beheaded the beast before it could react. It was a mission smoothly done, and that too just in time. After that, Aldi's made a triumphant return back to the capital with the heads of the monsters in hand. The people around him were left standing in shock as they couldn't believe a guy could bring the head of the Bell Seeker and Four Wings. As he kept walking the streets, people kept talking, and Cessair was also shocked when he got to see the monsters' heads. Aldi's was holding them like it was no big deal, and he greeted Cessair like they were bros. Aldi's asked him where he should turn these heads in to get the bounty, to which Cessair was shocked at first. He took his time to confirm that these heads were definitely of the two great demons. He couldn't believe that Aldi's could defeat them even if he just told him about these in the same morning. Aldi's replied it was more than enough time, which left Cessair speechless, and no matter what. Now Cessair couldn't doubt Aldi's skills as he informed Aldi's that he could take these heads to the guard station or headquarters of the knights to get the bounty. The people around the tavern were staring at this unusual sight until Aldis went to the waitress and announced that today everyone here would have free drinks. She didn't expect he would give such a big sum of money, and the people were never gonna reject the appreciation of free booze anytime. They asked Aldis for his name, and he happily left the Aldis word for them to cheer on. The people cheered for the guy who defeated 2 of the great demons and toasted at his name. After that, the moment the news of the Bell Seeker and the 4 Wings was made public, the capital became bustling with festivities, and thanks to the people who had witnessed Aldis' strength with their own eyes, his popularity shot almost high enough to reach everyone's ear. The people who had planned to capture him had all given up, and this good news made Aldis a little relieved. While Cessair was glad as well because now he won't be under threat by Aldis either. Not only that, but Cessair was also being asked questions like what kind of relationship he had with the one who subjugated those demons, and they questioned him about all sorts of things. Aldis told him not to interrupt his breakfast, to which Cessair mentioned that he came here actually with a valuable piece of information. Cessair mentioned that he realized it fully that Aldis used him to make a name for himself, and now it would only be natural for Cessair to take some credit for telling him about the 3 great demons as compensation. Cessair assured him that he knew how strong Aldis was, so he wouldn't dare to plot anything against him. It was just that he wanted to maintain a good relationship with him, and when it was about work, he always trusted him. Aldis figured this guy was quite strong-willed, so he agreed to tell him about the 2 monsters he defeated. Then Cessair asked him how he managed to hunt the 4 Wings in such a short time. Aldis said it would be 500 gold coins, which was clearly an harassment amount of money. He figured that Aldis might have earned much from the subjugation, and now even the organizations around the country would love to recruit him. Cessair asked him if he ever thought of switching jobs, but he stayed silent. Cessair didn't want to pry too much into his personal life now, so he asked Aldis if he would like to have a good recommendation for a request with good pay, or just the last of the 3 great demons, the Red Eater. Aldis was interested in knowing more about it, after which Cessair said he would look into it if he wanted him to. Aldis said he didn't need it, because his purpose was to shut down anyone who might think of messing with him, and he had already accomplished that. He didn't have any need to go after another monster, but the Red Eater was a bit concerned because Aldis, Nail, and the twins lived there. When he went back, he informed Nail that everything went as planned, and she praised her lord from the hard work. However, the only problem Aldis had was that he got swarmed every time he went to the city, because everyone liked to treat him as their hero. He giggled at being called a hero for something this trivial. Then he thought what would happen if he was really strong enough to be a true hero. Then Nail asked him if there was something troubling him, which brought Aldis out of his thinking, and that was when he informed Nail about the Red Eater. It was possible that this monster might appear on the night of full moon in 3 days, so they should remain wary of it. Now then, he wanted to spend some time easy, as he hadn't gotten to be with the twins for a long time. Then twins came there looking from the side of the door. They heard what Aldis just said, and were ever ready to play with him, so the twins surrounded Aldis and started playing with him. After that, all 4 of them ended up playing house together, where Aldis and Nail become the parents, while Philia and Rihanna as kids. Aldis seemed to be having a tough time keeping up with playing house, and the role of him as the dad made it more nervous for him. He told Nail to say something as the mom as well, and once she took it as an order from her lord, Nail completely changed and started acting like she was their real mommy with Aldis as the father of twins. She was totally nailing her role. And later on, Aldis and Philia were watering the plants together. Aldis started to feel tired, so he said he would now rest for a bit. He figured that playing house with kids was more exhausting than fighting, and now he should rest well so that he won't repeat the same mistake from before when he fell asleep and twins got out. Aldis had always been wondering why he had gotten more sleepy after coming to this world, but anyways he figured this might be some changes for the same. He used his wind magic to form a temporary bed and then put a blanket on it to make it as comfortable as he could. He knew that Philia and Rihanna would laugh at him being this clumsy just to rest. Then after some time passed, the twins wanted to see Aldis. They went to check what Aldis was doing, to which Nail replied that he was just taking a nap. Nail could see that twins might not have recovered from their fear of unfamiliar objects. The twins went close to Aldis and saw him sleeping really deep. They felt like playing with him even now, and thus the twins started pulling his cheeks, playing with the band on his forehead which he always kept on his head and rested. After a few minutes, Nail saw that the twins were also asleep with Aldis, and this peaceful scene wasn't really something one would witness in the middle of Caucasus forest where monsters roam. She thought that these girls were really lucky that Aldis took them in, and while the number of humans suffering was immeasurable, she thought it meant a lot to extend his hand to the twins who just happened to be in front of him. She was sure that Aldi's must not have given it any thought when he took in the twins, and his kindness was really admirable. She felt good for them while Nail put a blanket on them. She was also happy to focus on her mission of protecting those twins. However, she was looking forward to what life these twins would lead with her Lord Aldi's being the one to guide them. Nail felt like she just talked too much. Then she noticed something on the forehead of Aldi's, under his band. There seemed to be a sign which Nail knew must be hidden for some reason. So, she put his band back properly and went on her duty to guard them. Meanwhile, it seems that somewhere in the forest of Caucasus, there was soon going to be another danger coming towards them, which was not just a single entity, but hundreds or more generated from the place, which was very much like some laboratory or research center, and inside it, a fully transparent female monster seemed to be waiting for something, like a full moon. Now it was the night of the full moon and the forest seemed to feel a bit unusual than the other days. Aldi's was lying in his bed knowing something wasn't right out there. Nail came and informed him the same, that it was a bit noisy out there in the forest. Both of them could sense something was approaching them from the forest, which were actually some beasts and monsters. They weren't actually that strong individually, but considering their abnormal numbers together, Aldi's knew he must do something about it. He gave Nail the duty to take care of the twins, and if it gets too dangerous then she must escape into the skies. After that, Aldi's went out in the forest under this full moon to see just what was there. In his way, he noticed that the monsters were now too close, and soon a hound appeared in sight. Aldi's noticed that the eyes of this hound didn't seem to be looking at him, but either way he had to slash it right down here. Aldi's knew these monsters weren't really harmful since they couldn't see him, or more likely, they were just trying to run away. Aldi's still killed those hounds and wondered what was going on that made these hounds this vigilant. Soon, it was not just one or two hounds but a whole herd of monsters from the forest. Aldi's could deal with them easily, but the problem here was if he used large-scale magic here, it would catch too much attention. And more importantly, these monsters were running away from something, so he flew up and went towards his home. There, Nail was already in the sky with the twins in her hands, and Aldi's apologized for not being able to stop them. Nail said it couldn't be helped and this scale of monsters haven't been seen before at once. So, they had no choice left but to stay away from their home, which was now being crushed by the numerous monsters, trampling over whatever they built in past few days. The twins were scared after seeing their home being destroyed like that, and the scene of it being trampled down went on for a while until everything turned to ashes. Aldi's knew he couldn't have anything about it. Then he heard the sounds of sobbing of the twins who were crying after losing their home again. Aldi's went and assured them that it was all right and they could just rebuild it again. After seeing the rubble left down there, he had his concerns, but thankfully Nail had buried their belongings deep into the ground. Aldi's noticed there were some monsters down there as well into the rubble who lost their footing and died from the trampling of their own kind. However, it seemed to be too quiet now, but when he looked to the other side of the forest, Aldi's saw there were some mysterious things approaching them which had the same shape as humans but were transparent. Aldi's wondered what these things were, and he noticed that these things just went past him like they weren't hostile towards them. Aldi's realized these creatures were actually going towards the dead bodies of the monsters. Once they got closer to those bodies, they turned down. Aldi's wondered what they were doing, and suddenly these bodies changed their heads into a sharp jaw with hundreds of flesh-tearing teeth, and the twins feared the sight of these monsters eating up the ones in the ground. After they ate them, these dark things became red in color, and as for the red ones, the black ones ate them as if they had no sense of unity or intelligence. The monsters just started eating each other all of a sudden, and Aldi's noticed that these monsters were reacting to anything red this time. He understood that all of these must be the Red Eater, and suddenly one of them recognized Aldi's and others as their prey. Aldi's moved to cut that Red Eater and noticed its body was quite sturdy, so it took him some extra force to cut it down into pieces. Aldi's figured that if all of these were this tough, then he might have a hard time against so many of them. He alerted Nail that they have recognized them as enemies, so she should take the girls and go away. She obeyed him at once, while Aldi's stayed down there to fight off these monsters. He used his sword magic to the full potential and started tearing them down in pieces one after another. Their bodies were as tough as iron, and whenever he killed one, another one would attack him from another direction. So far, Aldi's was able to dodge their movements, but with their toughness combined with their weight and numbers, this Red Eater might be the toughest monster he faced so far. Aldi's was currently fending them off and destroyed about half of them for now. As the night was just growing darker, Aldi's started to feel like he was just repeating himself, and Nail asked if he required any assistance. Aldi's declined from taking any help, and asked Nail to just make sure to protect the twins properly. He wanted to find a way to defeat all of these monsters, and since it seemed they were instead growing in numbers, Philia and Rihanna shouted that more of these red eaters appeared to be coming here. Aldis was annoyed by them, and he knew that he couldn't guarantee the safety of twins if this kept up for long. These things started to feel like they were coming in a pattern, so he asked Nail to go to the sky, and if the situation gets worse, she should leave the forest. Nail asked him if he would stay here, to which Aldis replied that these things were coming from the direction of the east. He claimed that he would go and take care of the place wherever these things were spawning from. He told the twins to not worry and go with Nail, while he would be back soon. The twins didn't argue with Aldis, and they went along with Nail like they were told to. Nail was concerned a bit how Aldis would deal with these things by himself as he went deeper into the forest. After that, Aldis flew in above the forest and went towards the place where these red eaters were coming from. On the way, he was looking at the number of these things increasing continuously, and during that time, he sensed a large source of magic power over the target area. Once Aldis arrived on the spot, he looked down from the sky and found a location between the forests. Aldis was surprised to see a structure like that, as he couldn't have thought by any chance that a laboratory like this could be here as well. It seemed that he had seen one of those in the place he came from as well, and the red eaters were abundant around that building. Aldis wanted to try something, so he concentrated a large amount of his magic power and compressed it all into a small orb. It took a lot of focus for him to send this compressed bomb of the light magic and place it down among the red eaters in that building. The compressed light magic bomb exploded and caused a great deal of damage to the whole area. But Aldis didn't stop there, and so he formed hundreds of sharp rocks and threw them all down there at that building as well. He kept attacking the structure continuously, and just when he thought he tried everything, he had a guess that this building won't be damaged that easily. This structure was still standing strong, and it wasn't even scratched by so many powerful attacks on it one after another. Aldis went to check out this building from up close, so he landed at the gate of the facility and went in there by smashing the door with his leg. But what awaited him there was another door in a dark room.